Welcome, engineers. If you're aiming to pass your DP-600 exam, you're in the right place. We're diving into Case Study 1. Here are the general instructions for case study that you can pause the video and read. Let's dive in. Here's the overview. Contoso, LLC, is a US-based health supplements company. Contoso has two divisions named Sales and Research. The Sales Division contains two departments named Online Sales and Retail Sales. The Research Division assigns internally developed product lines to individual teams of researchers and analysts. Their existing environment says that Contoso has a Microsoft Entra tenant named Contoso.com. The tenant contains two groups named Research Reviewers Group 1 and Research Reviewers Group 2. Coming to data environment, Contoso has the following data environment. The Sales Division uses a Microsoft Power BI Premium capacity. The semantic model of the Online Sales Department includes a fact table named Orders that uses import made. In the system of origin, the order ID value represents the sequence in which orders are created. The Research Department uses an on-premises, third-party data warehousing product. Fabric is enabled for Contoso.com. An Azure Data Lake Storage Gen 2 storage account, named Storage 1, contains Research Division data for a product line named Product Line 1. The data is in the Delta format. A Data Lake Storage Gen 2 storage account, named Storage 2, contains Research Division data for a product line named Product Line 2. The data is in the CSV format. Here are the requirements. In planned changes, Contoso plans to make the following changes. Enable support for Fabric in the Power BI Premium capacity used by the Sales Division. Make all the data for the Sales Division and the Research Division available in Fabric. For the Research Division, create two Fabric workspaces named Product Line 1Ws and Product Line 2Ws. In Product Line 1Ws, create a Lakehouse named Lakehouse 1. In Lakehouse 1, create a shortcut to Storage 1 named Research Product. Data Analytics Requirements. Contoso identifies the following data analytics requirements. All the workspaces for the Sales Division and the Research Division must support all Fabric experiences. The Research Division workspaces must use a dedicated, on-demand capacity that has per-minute billing. The Research Division workspaces must be grouped together logically to support OneLake Data Hub filtering based on the department name. For the Research Division workspaces, the members of Research Reviewers Group 1 must be able to read Lakehouse and warehouse data and shortcuts by using SQL endpoints. For the Research Division workspaces, the members of Research Reviewers Group 2 must be able to read Lakehouse data by using Lakehouse Explorer. All the semantic models and reports for the Research Division must use version control that supports branching. Data preparation requirements. Contoso identifies the following data preparation requirements. The Research Division data for Product Line 1 must be retrieved from Lakehouse 1 by using Fabric notebooks. All the Research Division data in the Lakehouses must be presented as managed tables in Lakehouse Explorer. Semantic model requirements. Contoso identifies the following requirements for implementing and managing semantic models. The number of rows added to the orders table during refreshes must be minimized. The semantic models in the Research Division workspaces must use direct lake mode. General requirements. Contoso identifies the following high-level requirements that must be considered for all solutions. Follow the principle of least privilege when applicable. Minimize implementation and maintenance effort when possible. Here comes our question. You need to ensure that Contoso can use version control to meet the data analytics requirements and the general requirements. What should you do? A. Store at the semantic models and reports in Data Lake Gen 2 storage. B. Modify the settings of the research workspaces to use a GitHub repository. C. Modify the settings of the Research Division workspaces to use an Azure Repos repository. D. Store all the semantic models and reports in Microsoft OneDrive. Please pause the video and take a moment to think about it. The answer is option C. Modify the settings of the Research Division workspaces to use an Azure Repos repository. Why? Because if we look at the options, option A, storing semantic models and reports in Data Lake Gen 2 storage might provide a storage solution, but it does not address the requirement for version control. Option B, while GitHub is a popular version control platform and supports branching, it will not integrate seamlessly with Contoso's Azure-based environment. Option D, Microsoft OneDrive is primarily a file hosting service and is not well suited for version control of complex datasets, semantic models, and reports, and has nothing to do with version control. Therefore, the correct answer is C. Modify the settings of the Research Division workspaces to use an Azure Repos repository. Also, to support our answer, let's look at the Microsoft documentation that says, currently, only Git in Azure repos with the same tenant as the Fabric tenant is supported. Let's move on to the next question. You need to recommend a solution to group the Research Division workspaces. What should you include in the recommendation? To answer, select the appropriate options in the answer area. Please pause the video and take a moment to think about it. The grouping method is domain because, in Fabric, a domain logically groups together all the data in an organization relevant to a particular area or field. You can read more about it in the Microsoft documentation, linked in the description box. The tool for this task is the Fabric admin portal. You can create domains using the admin portal. While you might argue that OneLake Data Hub can be used, it is primarily for viewing domains and underlying artifacts, not for creating them. Since the question asks for a solution to group the Research Division workspaces, I would recommend using the Fabric admin portal. Question 3. You need to refresh the orders table of the online sales department. The solution must meet the semantic model requirements. What should you include in the solution? A. An Azure Data Factory pipeline that executes a stored procedure activity to retrieve the maximum value of the order ID column in the destination Lakehouse B. An Azure Data Factory pipeline that executes a stored procedure activity to retrieve the minimum value of the order ID column in the destination Lakehouse C. An Azure Data Factory pipeline that executes a data flow to retrieve the minimum value of the order ID column in the destination Lakehouse D. An Azure Data Factory pipeline that executes a data flow to retrieve the maximum value of the order ID column in the destination Lakehouse. The correct answer is D. Firstly, options B and C talk about the minimum value, so those two options are ruled out. In option A, a stored procedure does not return a value, so the correct answer is D. There is a detailed explanation about incremental loads in the Microsoft documentation, which I will link in the description box for your reference. Now, let's move on to the last question for this case study. Which syntax should you use in a notebook to access the Research Division data for Product Line 1? Please pause the video and take a moment to think about it. The correct answer is option B because it has the correct syntax. Here is the syntax from the documentation. Question 64. You need to recommend which type of Fabric Capacity SKU meets the data analytics requirements for the Research Division. What should you recommend? A, B, EM, C, P, D, F. The correct answer is option D, F. We all know that the Fabric SKUs start with F, and all other options are incorrect. Question 65. You need to migrate the Research Division data for Product Line 1. The solution must meet the data preparation requirements. How should you complete the code? To answer, select the appropriate options in the answer area. The correct answers are Delta for the format and Tables Product Line for the save location. Why choose Delta over CSV or Parquet? CSV. This format isn't suitable for our needs because it doesn't support creating managed tables, which are crucial for maintaining metadata and data lifecycle within a lakehouse. Parquet. While Parquet does support managed tables and could technically be used, it doesn't align with the specific requirement of this case study: the need to query data using SQL endpoints. Delta format supports this capability seamlessly, making it the preferred choice. Why the specific path? Tables, product line. The path, Tables product line 1, is correct because it directly points to where we want our data stored within the Lakehouse's structured directory system, without needing additional subdirectories. It simplifies access and management. Additional note on usage. When using the Save as Table as method, you do not need to specify the tables prefix, as Spark handles this internally when managing metadata for the table. Using Save, the full path needs to be explicitly defined if you're not using Save as Table. Question 66. What should you use to implement calculation groups for the research division semantic models? A. Microsoft Power BI Desktop. B. The Power BI Service. C. DAX Studio. D. Tabular Editor. Option A, B and D can all be correct answers because you can create calculation group by either Microsoft Power BI Desktop, the Power BI Service, or Tabular Editor. Since the question asks to pick one, I would select Tabular Editor, since it is easy to create calculation group in it compared to others' tools according to the Microsoft community. Question 67. Which workspace role assignments should you recommend for research reviewers Group 1 and research reviewers Group 2? To answer, select the appropriate options in the answer area. Research reviewers Group 1 requires viewer access because, according to the requirements, they need to be able to read Lakehouse and warehouse data and access shortcuts via SQL endpoints. Research reviewers Group 2 needs contributor access as they are required to read Lakehouse data through the Lakehouse Explorer. For a better understanding of roles within Microsoft Fabric workspaces, I recommend you to review the Workspace Roles documentation prior to your exam. We're diving into Case Study 2. Litware, Inc. is a manufacturing company that has offices throughout North America. The analytics team at Litware contains data engineers, analytics engineers, data analysts, and data scientists. In their existing environment, Litware has been using a Microsoft Power BI tenant for 3 years. Litware has not enabled any Fabric capacities and features. In the available data, Litware has data that must be analyzed as shown in the following table, and the product data contains a single table and the following columns. The customer satisfaction data contains the survey, question, and response tables. For each survey submitted, the following occurs. 1 row is added to the survey table. 1 row is added to the response table for each question in the survey. The question table contains the text of each survey question. The third question in each survey response is an overall satisfaction score. Customers can submit a survey after each purchase. User problems. The analytics team has large volumes of data, some of which is semi-structured. The team wants to use Fabric to create a new data store. Product data is often classified into 3 pricing groups: high, medium, and low. This logic is implemented in several databases and semantic models, but the logic does not always match across implementations. Under requirements, we have planned changes, where Litware plans to enable Fabric features in the existing tenant. The analytics team will create a new data store as a proof of concept, POC. The remaining Litware users will only get access to the Fabric features once the POC is complete. The POC will be completed by using a Fabric trial capacity. The following 3 workspaces will be created. 1. Analytics. POC will contain the data store, semantic models, reports pipelines, data flow, and notebooks used to populate the data store. 2. Data engineering POC will contain all the pipelines, data flows, and notebooks used to populate OneLake. 3. Data science POC will contain all the notebooks and reports created by the data scientists. The following will be created in the Analytics POC workspace. a data store, type to be decided, a custom semantic model, a default semantic model. Requirement for the interactive reports are the data engineers will create data pipelines to load data to OneLake, either hourly or daily depending on the data source. The analytics engineers will create processes to ingest, transform, and load the data to the data store in the Analytics POC workspace daily. Whenever possible, the data engineers will use low-code tools for data ingestion. The choice of which data cleansing and transformation tools to use will be at the data engineer's discretion. All the semantic models and reports in the Analytics POC workspace will use the data store as the sole data source. Technical requirements. The data store must support the following: read access by using T-SQL or Python, semi-structured and unstructured data, row-level security, RLS, for users executing T-SQL queries, files loaded by the data engineers to OneLake will be stored in the Parquet format and will meet Delta Lake specifications. Data will be loaded without transformation in one area of the Analytics POC data store. The data will then be cleansed, merged, and transformed into a dimensional model. The data load process must ensure that the raw and cleansed data is updated completely before populating the dimensional model. The dimensional model must contain a date dimension. There is no existing data source for the date dimension. The Litware fiscal year matches the calendar year. The date dimension must always contain dates from 2010 through the end of the current year. The product pricing group logic must be maintained by the analytics engineers in a single location. The pricing group data must be made available in the data store for TSOL, queries, and in the default semantic model. The following logic must be used. List prices that are less than or equal to 50 are in the low pricing group. List prices that are greater than 50 and less than or equal to 1,000 are in the medium pricing group. List prices that are greater than 1,000 are in the high pricing group. Security requirements. Only Fabric administrators and the analytics team must be able to see the Fabric items created as part of the POC. Litware identifies the following security requirements for the Fabric items in the Analytics POC workspace. Fabric administrators will be the workspace administrators. The data engineers must be able to read from and write to the data store. No access must be granted to datasets or reports. The analytics engineers must be able to read from, write to, and create schemas in the data store. They also must be able to create and share semantic models with the data analysts and view and modify all reports in the workspace. The data scientists must be able to read from the data store, but not write to it. They will access the data by using a Spark notebook. The data analysts must have read access to only the dimensional model objects in the data store. They also must have access to create Power BI reports by using the semantic models created by the analytics engineers. The date dimension must be available to all users of the data store. The principle of least privilege must be followed. Both the default and custom semantic models must include only tables or views from the dimensional model in the data store. Litware already has the following Microsoft Entra security groups: Fabric admins, Fabric administrators, analytics team, all the members of the analytics team, data analysts, the data analysts on the analytics team, data scientists, the data scientists on the analytics team, data engineers, the data engineers on the analytics team, analytics engineers, the analytics engineers on the analytics team. Report requirements. The data analysts must create a customer satisfaction report that meets the following requirements. Enables a user to select a product to filter customer survey responses to only those who have purchased that product. Displays the average overall satisfaction score of all the surveys submitted during the last 12 months, up to a selected DAT. Shows data as soon as the data is updated in the data store. Ensures that the report and the semantic model only contain data from the current and previous year. ensures that the report respects any table-level security specified in the source data store, minimizes the execution time of report queries. Here is the question. You need to assign permissions for the data store in the Analytics POC workspace. The solution must meet the security requirements. Which additional permissions should you assign when you share the data store? To answer, select the appropriate options in the answer area. Pause the video, take a moment to think it through, and then check out the answer. The correct answer for data engineers is Read All Apache Spark, which is the Read All permission. This permission is necessary because data engineers need to read and write data to the data store, as specified in the security requirements. According to Microsoft documentation, the Read All permission should be provided only if the shared recipient wants complete access to your warehouse's files using the Spark engine. For the data analysts, it is the Build Reports on the default dataset permission because, with the build permission, the shared recipient can create reports using the default semantic model connected to your warehouse, and this fulfills the analytics requirement mentioned in the case study. The data scientists would need Read All Apache Spark permission, because with this permission, the shared recipient has read access to the underlying Parquet files in OneLake, which can be consumed using Spark, and the case study mentions that the data scientists will access the data by using Spark notebooks. You might have thought SQL endpoints as correct answer, as they are read only, but it isn't because SQL endpoints do not support Spark notebooks. The next question is, you need to create a DAX measure to calculate the average overall satisfaction score. How should you complete the DAX code? Please take a moment to review the code and verify your answer. The correct answer is average survey response value and period, because response value, it is the only value that can be aggregated, and the customer key does not make sense, as it is merely an identifier and cannot provide a score. Period is the correct, as it is used for defining a date range, which is pre-calculated as a variable. You need to resolve the issue with the pricing group classification. How should you complete the T-SQL statement? Take a moment to review the code and think and check the answer. The correct answer is View, because it meets the requirement of showing data as soon as the data is updated in the data store. If you thought Table because it should be part of the default semantic model, you are mistaken. Within the warehouse, a user can add warehouse objects, tables or views to their default Power BI semantic model. Therefore, the correct answer is View, as it displays data immediately after updates in the data store. A link is provided in the description to support this answer. Next correct answer option is a basic SQL case statement. Next question is, what should you recommend using to ingest the customer data into the data store in the Analytics POC workspace? A. A stored procedure. B. A pipeline that contains a KQL activity. C. A Spark notebook. D. A data flow. Take a moment to think and check the answer. The correct answer is D. Data flow, because it is the best option. Why? Let's check the other options. Option A. A stored procedure. It doesn't make sense to use a stored procedure for loading the data. Option B. This option is incorrect because KQL is for real-time data. Option C. A Spark notebook. Although this could work, the text states, whenever possible, the data engineers will use low-code tools for data ingestion. Option D. A data flow might not be the optimal solution, as we can use copy activity for this. Since copy activity is not given in the answer options, and a data flow can get this job done and is low-code, the correct answer is a data flow. Last question of the case study. Which type of data store should you recommend in the Analytics POC workspace? A. A data lake. B. A warehouse. C. A lakehouse. D. An external Hive metastore. Take a moment to think and go back and read the technical requirements if need, and then answer the question. The correct answer is Lakehouse, because Lakehouse supports unstructured, structured, and semi-structured data, and in the technical requirements, It says semi-structured and unstructured data, which should hint you to choose Lakehouse. Let's look at other options. Data lake could be valid, but it is not really a concept that we have in Fabric. B. A warehouse. It is not valid because it supports only structured data. D. An external Hive metastore doesn't make sense, as it is a centralized repository that stores metadata related to the tables, partitions, columns, schemas, and other data structures used by Hive and Spark. Question 60. You need to recommend a solution to prepare the tenant for the POC. Which 2 actions should you recommend performing from the Fabric admin portal? Each correct answer presents part of the solution. A. Enable the users can try Microsoft Fabric paid features option for the entire organization. B. Enable the users can try Microsoft Fabric paid features option for specific security groups. C. Enable the Allow Azure Active Directory guest users to access Microsoft Fabric option for specific security groups. D. Enable the users can create Fabric items option and exclude specific security groups. E. Enable the users can create Fabric items option for specific security groups. Pause the video, think about the answer, and let's discuss. The correct options are B and E. Let me explain why. Option A, enabling paid features for the entire organization, risks unnecessary exposure and costs since not everyone needs these features for the POC. This is why it's not suitable. Option B is correct because it restricts the trial of paid features to specific groups involved in the POC, aligning with the principle of least privilege. This focused approach limits potential risks and concentrates resources where they are most needed. Option C is incorrect because allowing Azure Active Directory guest users access is not relevant to the POC's internal team requirements and introduces unnecessary security risks. Option D, excluding specific security groups from creating Fabric items, could hinder the progress of team members who need these capabilities for the POC, making this approach inefficient. Option E is also correct. It enables specific security groups to create necessary Fabric items, ensuring that only authorized personnel are involved, which enhances security and efficiency. That's why B and E are the best choices, focusing on security and efficiency. Question 61. You need to design a semantic model for the customer satisfaction report. Which data source authentication method and mode should you use? To answer, select the appropriate options in the answer area. The correct answers for the setup involve SSO authentication and direct query mode. Let's explore why these choices are optimal for the scenario. Authentication method, single sign-on. SSO is the preferred authentication method because it allows users to authenticate using their existing organizational credentials. This not only simplifies access across multiple systems, but also bolsters security by reducing the number of separate credentials users need to manage. Basic authentication, which relies on usernames and passwords, doesn't align with the robust security requirements of enterprise-level applications within Fabric. Service principal authentication is generally used for non-interactive applications or automated tools, which does not fit the interactive needs of analytics team members who will be working directly with the reports and semantic models. Thus, it is an incorrect choice. Mode. Direct query is chosen because it ensures that the data displayed in reports is as current as possible by querying the data source in real time whenever the report is accessed. While Direct Lake is a viable option due to its efficiency and support for row-level security, it does not guarantee immediate data updates, as it may rely on cached data. This can be a limitation when the requirement specifies that the data needs to reflect updates immediately. By selecting SSO authentication and direct query mode, we ensure both secure and efficient access to the most current data, aligning with the project's security and performance requirements. For a deeper understanding, I recommend checking out the provided links in the video description for detailed guidance on setting up these features in Fabric. Question 62. You need to implement the date dimension in the data store. The solution must meet the technical requirements. What are 2 ways to achieve the goal? Each correct answer presents a complete solution. Note: each correct selection is worth 1 point. A. Populate the date dimension table by using a Dataflow. B. Populate the date dimension table by using a copy activity in a pipeline. C. Populate the date dimension view by using T-SQL. D. Populate the date dimension table by using a stored procedure activity in a pipeline. Pause the video and consider the options before checking the answer. The correct answers are option A and option D. Option A. Data flows are excellent tools in Fabric for managing data transformations and manipulations before storage. They are particularly adept at handling date calculations and transformations, making them ideal for creating a date dimension from scratch. Thus, it is a correct answer choice. Option B. While the copy activity is efficient for moving data from one place to another, it isn't typically used for generating new data from scratch, since there's no existing data source for a date dimension. This is an incorrect option. Option C. This option is incorrect because it involves a view, which does not store data persistently. Views only display data based on existing tables and cannot serve as standalone data storage, especially not for a date dimension that requires physical storage for efficient querying and reporting. Thus, this is also an incorrect choice. Option D. Stored procedures provide a robust method for encapsulating business logic for data manipulation directly within the SQL environment, so it is our correct answer choice. Question 63. You need to ensure the data loading activities in the Analytics POC workspace are executed in the appropriate sequence. The solution must meet the technical requirements. What should you do? A. Create a data flow that has multiple steps and schedule the data flow. B. Create and schedule a Spark notebook. C. Create and schedule a Spark job definition. D. Create a pipeline that has dependencies between activities and schedule the pipeline. Pause the video and consider the options before checking the answer. The correct choice here is option D, which involves using a pipeline with dependencies between activities. This approach is ideal because it ensures that all data loading activities are executed one after the other in sequence. Other options fall short for the following reasons. Option A suggests creating a data flow with multiple steps. While data flows are great for managing sequential data processing within their scope, they lack the comprehensive orchestration capabilities required for handling dependencies that span across multiple workflows or different types of operations. Option B involves scheduling a Spark notebook. Spark notebooks are better suited for exploratory data analysis and interactive data manipulation rather than for structured and repeatable data processing tasks required in production environments. Option C recommends scheduling a Spark job definition. Although this is effective for specific tasks, Spark jobs do not inherently offer a mechanism to manage complex dependencies between various tasks as effectively as a pipeline. You have a Fabric warehouse that contains a table named Staging Sales. Staging Sales contains the following columns. You need to write a T-SQL query that will return data for the year 2023 that displays product ID and product name and has a summarized amount that is higher than 10,000. Which query should you use? Pause the video and look at the answer options and check the answer. The correct answer is option A, because it uses the having clause with the aggregate sum function. The having clause was introduced in SQL to work with aggregate functions, which the where keyword cannot do. While option D might seem similar, it uses the alias total amount, which is not supported with the having clause, but is supported in the order by clause. Options B and C are incorrect because the having clause cannot be used with non-aggregate columns. You have a data warehouse that contains a table named Customers in the Stage schema. Customers contains all the customer record updates from a customer relationship management system. There can be multiple updates per customer. You need to write a T-SQL query that will return the customer ID, name, postal code, and the last updated time of the most recent row for each customer ID. How should you complete the code? To answer, select the appropriate options in the answer area. Pause the video, give it a think, and then check the answer. The correct answer is row number and where X is equal to 1. You have a data warehouse that contains a table named Customers in the stage schema. Customers contains all the customer record updates from a customer relationship management system. There can be multiple updates per customer. You need to write a T-SQL query that will return the customer ID, name, postal code, and the last updated time of the most recent row for each customer ID. How should you complete the code? To answer, select the appropriate options in the answer area. Pause the video, give it a think, and then check the answer. The correct answer is row number and where X is equal to 1. Question 12. You have a Fabric tenant. You plan to create a Fabric notebook that will use Spark data frames to generate Microsoft Power BI visuals. You run the following code. For each of the following statements, select yes if the statement is true, otherwise select no. Take a moment to review the code and think carefully. Then, check your answer. Let's first look at what the code does, and then check the answers. From Power BI Client Import. Quick Visualize, Get Dataset Config. In this line of code, we are importing the modules Quick Visualize and Get Dataset Config that are necessary to work with data frames in your notebook. Then, in the second line of code, it creates a new Power BI report object from a Spark data frame, and PBI Visualize renders a new report. Now, going back to our question. 1. The code embeds an existing Power BI report. No, because we saw that the code creates a new Power BI report. 2. The code creates a Power BI report? Yes. 3. The code displays a summary of the data frame. No, because it is the display df summary true function that gives you a summary of the data frame. Though you might say that PBI Visualize, which creates a report, also gives a quick summary as shown in the image, I would still go with no for the third question. This is because the code snippet clearly states that it renders a new report. According to Microsoft documentation, the display df summary true function should be used to check the statistical summary of a given data frame. The summary includes the column name, column type, unique values, and missing values for each column. You can also select a specific column to see its minimum value, maximum value, mean value, and standard deviation. For more information, please read the link in the description about notebook visualization in Microsoft Fabric. You are the administrator of a Fabric workspace that contains a Lakehouse named Lakehouse 1. Lakehouse 1 contains the following tables. Table 1, a delta table created by using a shortcut. Table 2, an external table created by using Spark. Table 3, a managed table. You plan to connect to Lakehouse 1 by using its SQL endpoint. What will you be able to do after connecting to Lakehouse 1? A. Read Table 3. B. Update the data. Table 3. C. Read Table 2. D. Update the data in Table 1. Read the question again and give it a think and check the answer. The correct answer is A. Read Table 3. Let's break down why this is the case. Firstly, since we are using a SQL endpoint, it's important to know that SQL endpoints are read-only. This means that options B and D, which involve updating data, are incorrect. Now we are left with options A and C. Let's consider option C. Read Table 2. Table 2 is an external table created using Spark. Typically, external tables created by Spark cannot be accessed through SQL endpoints. Now, let's look at option A. Read Table 3. Table 3 is a managed table. Managed tables are fully controlled by the Lakehouse, including storage and metadata management. This means that these tables are fully supported for both read and write operations via SQL endpoints. So, with the SQL endpoint, you can read Table 3 without any issues. Therefore, the correct answer is A. Read Table 3. You have a Fabric tenant that contains a warehouse. You use a Dataflow to load a new dataset from OneLake to the warehouse. You need to add a Power Query step to identify the maximum values for the numeric columns. Which function should you include in the step? A. Table. Max n. Option B. Table max. Option C. Table range. Option D. Table profile. Look through the options carefully and answer the question. The correct answer is table profile. If you said table max, you are wrong. Initially, I also thought table max might be correct, but it's not. Table max returns the largest row in the table, given the comparison criteria. It doesn't provide a summary of the maximum values for each numeric column. Notice that the question asks for the maximum values for numeric columns, plural. If it asked for a single column's maximum value, table max could have been an option. Let's see the other options. Option A, table max n. This function returns the largest row or rows in the table, given the comparison criteria. It's not designed to return the maximum values for each numeric column. Option C, table range. This function returns a specified number of rows from a table starting at a specified offset. It's unrelated to finding the maximum values for numeric columns. Option D, table profile provides a statistical summary of a table, including the maximum values for each numeric column. This makes it the right choice for our requirement. So, the correct answer is Option D, table profile. Just a reminder, make sure you read the questions in the exam carefully so that you don't make silly mistakes. Question 15. You have a Fabric tenant that contains a machine learning model registered in a Fabric workspace. You need to use the model to generate predictions by using the predict function in a Fabric notebook. Which two languages can you use to perform model scoring? Each correct answer presents a complete solution. A. T-SQL, B. DAX, C. Spark SQL, D. PySpark. Pause the video and take a moment to think and check the answer. The correct answer is Spark SQL and PySpark. According to the Microsoft documentation, you can invoke the predict function using Transformer API from Synapse ML or Spark SQL API or PySpark User-Defined Function, UDF. Question 16. You are analyzing the data in a Fabric notebook. You have a Spark data frame assigned to a variable named df. You need to use the chart view in the notebook to explore the data manually. Which function should you run to make the data available in the chart view? A. Display HTML. B. Show C. Write D. Display. Pause the video, think it through, and verify your answer. The correct function to use is display. Let's look at our options in order. Option A. Display HTML. This function is used to display HTML content in the notebook, not to visualize data frames in the chart view. The show function prints the data frame to the console, which is useful for quick text-based inspections, but does not provide the interactive chart view. The write function is used to write the data frame to external storage, such as a file or a database, and doesn't help in visualizing the data frame within the notebook. The correct answer is the display function, because it outputs the data frame in a way that allows for interactive exploration and visualization. It's integrated with the notebook environment, providing features like chart view, making it the ideal choice for this task. To make your data available in the chart view in a Fabric notebook, you should use the display function. This function is specifically designed to visualize Spark data frames in various forms, such as charts, tables, and other visual representations directly within the notebook interface. So, remember, to interactively explore your data using the chart view in a Fabric notebook, you need to use the display function. For more information, you can check out the Microsoft documentation on using display in notebooks. Question 17. You have a Fabric tenant that contains a Microsoft Power BI report named Report 1. Report 1 includes a Python visual. Data displayed by the visual is grouped automatically, and duplicate rows are not displayed. You need all rows to appear in the visual. What should you do? A. Reference the columns in the Python code by index. B. Modify the sort column by property for all columns. C. Add a unique field to each row. D. Modify the summarize by property for all columns. Pause the video, think it through, and verify your answer. The correct answer is option C. Add a unique field to each row. If you thought option A was correct, let me show you why it's not. Let's first rule out options B and D. Option B. Modify the sort column by property for all columns. This option changes the sorting order of the columns, but does not prevent Power BI from automatically grouping rows that have identical values in all displayed columns. Option D. Modify the summarize by property for all columns. This option is relevant for aggregating numerical data within standard Power BI visuals. It does not affect the grouping of rows in a Python visual, where you need to ensure that all rows, including duplicates, are displayed. Option A, reference the columns in the Python code by index, is incorrect. This option means accessing the data in the data frame using numerical indices. For example, df.ieloki index number ing, instead of column names like df.fieldname. This method does not affect how Power BI groups or displays the data because it only changes how you access data within the Python script. Accessing by column names or accessing by numerical indices, both approaches access the same data after Power BI's pre-processing, which means that the method used to reference the data in the Python script doesn't affect whether Power BI grouped the rows or not. So clearly, option A is incorrect because referencing columns by index does not affect how Power BI processes data. The correct approach is to add a unique field to each row, option C, because by adding a unique field to each row, it ensures all rows, including duplicates, are passed to the Python visual, and this prevents Power BI from grouping rows and ensures all are displayed. This solution is supported by Microsoft documentation, which states that adding an index field makes all rows unique and prevents grouping. I hope this explanation was helpful. Question 18. You have a Fabric tenant that contains a semantic model. The model contains data about retail stores. You need to write a DAX query that will be executed by using the XMLA endpoint. The query must return a table of stores that have opened since December 1st, 2023. How should you complete the DAX expression? Please check the code closely, give it a think, and verify your answer. The correct answer options are define, evaluate, and summarize. Please check the links in the description for more information. Question 19. You have a Fabric workspace named Workspace 1 that contains a data flow named Dataflow 1. Dataflow 1 has a query that returns 2,000 rows. You view the query in Power Query as shown in the following exhibit. What can you identify about the pickup longitude column? A. The column has duplicate values. B. All the table rows are profiled. C. The column has missing values. D. There are 935 values that occur only once. The correct answer is A. The column has duplicate values. Here's why. Option B. All the table rows are profiled is incorrect because the exhibit shows that only 1,000 rows are being profiled, not all 2,000 rows. Option C. The column has missing values is incorrect because the null count is 0, indicating there are no missing values in the column. Option D. There are 935 values that occur only once is incorrect because having 935 distinct values does not necessarily mean each occurs only once. And remember, the data is being profiled only on 1,000 rows. Therefore, the column must have duplicate values, which is option A. Always read the answer options carefully to avoid confusion. If you got this answer wrong, I strongly recommend watching the YouTube video mentioned in the description. Question 20. You have a Fabric tenant named Tenant1 that contains a workspace named WS1. WS1 uses a capacity named C1 and contains a dataset named DS1. You need to ensure read-write access to DS1 is available by using XMLA endpoint. What should be modified first? A. The DS1 settings. B. The WS1 settings. C. The C1 settings. D. The tenant settings. Pause the video and look at the answer options and check the answer. The correct answer is C. The C1 settings. To ensure read-write access to a dataset using the XMLA endpoint, you need to configure the capacity settings because the XMLA endpoint must be enabled at the capacity level. The other options are incorrect. Question 21. You have a Fabric tenant that contains a workspace named Workspace 1. Workspace 1 is assigned to a Fabric capacity. You need to recommend a solution to provide users with the ability to create and publish custom direct lake semantic models by using external tools. The solution must follow the principle of least privilege. Which 3 actions in the Fabric admin portal should you include in the recommendation? Each correct answer presents part of the solution. Note: each correct answer is worth 1 point. A. From the tenant settings, set allow XMLA endpoints and analyze in Excel with on-premises datasets to enabled. B. From the tenant settings, set allow Azure Active Directory guest users to access Microsoft Fabric to enabled. C. From the tenant settings, select users can edit data model in the Power BI service. D. From the capacity settings, set XMLA endpoint to read-write. E. From the tenant settings, set users can create Fabric items to enabled. F. From the tenant settings, enable publish to web. Pause the video, think it through, and verify your answer. The correct answer options are A, D, and E. Let's see why. Option A. From the tenant settings, set allow XMLA endpoints and analyze in Excel with on-premises datasets to enabled. This setting enables the use of XMLA endpoints, which are necessary for external tools like SSMS, Excel, Tabular Editor, or any other tool that can connect via XMLA to interact with semantic models. It also allows users to analyze data in Excel using live connections to these endpoints. For more details, refer to the Microsoft documentation. Option B. From the tenant settings, set allow Azure Active Directory guest users to access Microsoft Fabric to enabled. This setting allows guest users from Azure Active Directory to access Microsoft Fabric. However, it is not related to enabling or managing XMLA endpoints, creating semantic models, or providing the necessary permissions for internal users to create and publish custom direct lake semantic models, so it is incorrect. Option C. From the tenant settings, select users can edit data model in the Power BI service. While this setting allows users to edit data models within the Power BI service, it does not specifically enable the creation and management of custom direct lake semantic models using external tools or XMLA endpoints. It focuses more on editing existing models rather than creating new ones or managing them externally. According to the documentation, this setting doesn't apply to direct lake datasets or editing a dataset through an API or XMLA endpoint, which are considered external tools. Thus, this option is incorrect. Refer to the data model tenant settings for more information. Option D. From the capacity settings, set XMLA endpoint to read. Write. This setting allows read and write operations through the XMLA endpoint, which is essential for creating and publishing semantic models. Therefore, this is a correct answer option. Option E. From the tenant settings, set users can create Fabric items to enabled. This setting permits users to create items within Fabric, including custom semantic models. This is necessary for users to have the capability to manage their models. Therefore, this is a correct answer option. Option F. From the tenant settings, Enable Publish to Web. This setting allows users to publish reports to the web, making them publicly accessible. It does not pertain to the internal creation, modification, or management of semantic models using XMLA endpoints or external tools. It is more about sharing reports publicly rather than providing permissions for model creation and management, so it is incorrect. So, the correct options are A, D, and E. Hope you understood the reasons why. See you in the next video, and make sure to check the links provided for a deeper understanding. Question 22. You are creating a semantic model in Microsoft Power BI Desktop. You plan to make bulk changes to the model by using the Tabular Model Definition Language, TMDL, extension for Microsoft Visual Studio Code. You need to save the semantic model to a file. Which file format should you use? A. PBIP, B. PBX, C. PBIT, D. PBIDS. Pause the video, think it through, and verify your answer. The correct file format to use is A. PBIP. Why? The PBIP, Power BI Project file format, allows you to save your Power BI desktop project in a way that is compatible with external tools like Visual Studio Code for bulk editing using TMDL. PBIP files are particularly useful when working with tabular models and performing bulk modifications, making them ideal for this scenario. Let's see why the other options are incorrect. Option B. PBIX. This is the standard file format for Power BI desktop files. It contains the complete report, including the data model, visualizations, and report definitions. While PBIX files are essential for regular report development and sharing, they are not specifically designed for bulk editing with TMDL in Visual Studio Code, therefore it is incorrect. Option C. PBIT. This format is used for Power BI templates. It includes the report layout and queries, but does not contain the actual data. PBIT files are useful for creating reusable templates, but are not suited for direct bulk editing of the semantic model using TMDL. Therefore, it is incorrect. Option D. PBIDS. This file format is used for Power BI data source files. It defines the data sources and their connection details, but does not contain the data model or report elements. PBIDS files are not intended for semantic model modifications or bulk editing. Therefore, it is incorrect. By saving your semantic model in the PBIP format, you can effectively leverage the TMDL extension in Visual Studio Code for bulk changes. So, our answer is A, PBIP. Question 23. You have a Fabric tenant that contains a warehouse named Warehouse 1. Warehouse 1 contains 3 schemas named Schema A, Schema B, and Schema C. You need to ensure that a user named User1 can truncate tables in Schema A only. How should you complete the T-SQL statement? Please pause the video and look at the answer area and then verify your answer. The correct answer is grant alter on schema A to User1. Let's see why this is the correct answer. Grant alter permission. We need to grant the alter permission because it allows a user to perform data definition language, DDL operations, on objects within a schema. This includes creating, altering, or truncating tables. If you look at the Microsoft documentation, it says to truncate the minimum permission required is alter. Option B. Connect is incorrect because the connect permission allows a user to connect to the database. While it is necessary for accessing the database, it does not provide the ability to modify objects within the database, such as truncating tables. Option C. Execute is incorrect because the execute permission allows a user to execute stored procedures and functions. It does not grant permissions to modify or truncate tables. Correct schema specification on schema A. This specifies that the permission applies only to the schema named Schema A. To User1. This indicates that the permission is being granted to the user, User1. Why not other options? On database, Schema A. This is incorrect because Schema A is a schema, not a database. This syntax would be used if you were granting permissions on the entire database. On object schema A. This is incorrect because object is used for specific database objects like tables, views, etc. If you read the question, the requirement is to allow user 1 to truncate tables within schema A only, so permissions need to be granted at the schema level. Hope you understood the reasoning behind the answer. Question 24. You plan to deploy Microsoft Power BI items by using Fabric deployment pipelines. You have a deployment pipeline that contains 3 stages named development, test, and production. A workspace is assigned to each stage. You need to provide Power BI developers with access to the pipeline. The solution must meet the following requirements. Ensure that the developers can deploy items to the workspaces for development and test. Prevent the developers from deploying items to the workspace for production. Follow the principle of least privilege. Which 3 levels of access should you assign to the developers? Each correct answer presents part of the solution. A. Build permission to the production semantic models. B. Admin access to the deployment pipeline. C. Viewer access to the development and test workspaces. D. Viewer access to the production workspace. E. Contributor access to the development and test workspaces. F. Contributor access to the production workspace. Please take a moment to pause the video, review the answer options, and then verify your answer. The correct answer options are B, D, and E. Now, let's look at all the answer options and see why these are correct. Option A. Build permission to the production semantic models. This permission is incorrect because according to the Microsoft documentation, it states that workspace members assigned the viewer role without build permissions can't access the semantic model or edit workspace content. This means if you have build permission, you can access the semantic model or edit workspace content, which we do not want to give developers in production. Thus, this option is incorrect. Option B. Admin access to the deployment pipeline. Admin access is necessary for developers to manage the deployment process, move items between stages, and oversee the entire pipeline. Without this access, they wouldn't be able to deploy items to any workspace. You might think that giving admin access allows developers to move items between development, test, and production stages. However, we can control the permission on the production workspace by assigning the developer as a viewer, option D, so they cannot deploy to production. Option C. Viewer access to the development and test workspaces. Viewer access is too restrictive. To ensure that developers can deploy items to the development and test workspaces, they need contributor access, which is option E, making it the correct answer. Option D. Viewer access to the production workspace. Assigning developers as viewers in the production workspace ensures they can see but not deploy or modify content in production. This adheres to the principle of least privilege, making it the correct choice. Option E. Contributor access to the development and test workspaces. Contributor access allows developers to make changes and deploy items within the development and test workspaces. This access level is necessary for their development and testing tasks, making it the correct answer. Option F. Contributor access to the production workspace. This violates the principle of least privilege by allowing developers to make changes in the production environment. Therefore, it is incorrect. So, by selecting options B, D, and E, we can ensure that developers have the necessary permissions to perform their tasks without having more access than required, particularly in the production environment. I hope this explanation was helpful. Please review the roles in workspaces in Microsoft Fabric before your exam. Question 25. You have a Fabric workspace that contains a direct query semantic model. The model queries a data source that has 500 million rows. You have a Microsoft Power BI report named Report 1 that uses the model. Report 1 contains visuals on multiple pages. You need to reduce the query execution time for the visuals on all the pages. What are two features that you can use? Each correct answer presents a complete solution. A. User-defined aggregations. B. Automatic aggregation. C. Query caching. D. OneLake integration. Pause the video and think about what the correct options might be. Then, resume to check your answer. The correct answers are option A and B. Let's see why. Option A. User-defined aggregations. User-defined aggregations allow you to pre-aggregate data at different levels of granularity. By doing so, Power BI can query the pre-aggregated data rather than the raw data, significantly reducing query times and improving performance. According to the documentation, aggregations in Power BI can improve query performance over large direct query semantic models. By using aggregations, you cache data at the aggregated level in memory. Thus, it is the correct answer. Option B. Automatic aggregations is correct because automatic aggregations use state-of-the-art machine learning, ML, to continuously optimize direct query semantic models for maximum report query performance based on usage patterns in Power BI. This feature optimizes query performance by pre-aggregating data and minimizing the need to query large datasets directly. Read more about it from the links given in the description box. If you thought option C, query caching, was correct like me, we both are incorrect. While query caching can help improve performance by storing query results, it is typically less effective for reports with highly dynamic data or user interactions. It also does not directly address the scale and complexity of querying 500 million rows. Additionally, the documentation states that query caching is not applicable for direct query or live connect semantic models. And in our question, it is mentioned that we have a direct query semantic model. So this option is incorrect. Option D. OneLake integration is also incorrect. OneLake integration is not specifically aimed at optimizing query performance within Power BI reports. It is more focused on providing a unified data lake solution and does not directly impact query execution times for direct query models. Question 26. You have a Fabric tenant that contains 30 CSV files in OneLake. The files are updated daily. You create a Microsoft Power BI semantic model named Model 1 that uses the CSV files as a data source. You configure incremental refresh for Model 1 and publish the model to a premium capacity in the Fabric tenant. When you initiate a refresh of Model 1, the refresh fails after running out of resources. What is a possible cause of the failure? A. Query folding is occurring. B. Only refresh complete days is selected. C. XMLA endpoint is set to read-only. D. Query folding is not occurring. E. The data type of the column used to partition the data has changed. The answer options are tricky, so please review the question and options, then verify your answer. The correct answer is option E. If you thought it was option D, query folding is not occurring, let me explain why that is incorrect. Query folding does not happen with CSV files. Supporting documentation from Microsoft confirms that query folding is not applicable to flat file sources like CSVs. Therefore, the refresh failure is not due to the absence of query folding, as it would not be possible in this scenario. Option A. Query folding is occurring. Query folding means that data transformations are being pushed down to the data source, significantly reducing the workload on Power BI. Given that the data source is CSV files, query folding cannot occur, making this scenario incorrect. Option B. Only refresh complete days is selected. This setting ensures that all rows for an entire day are included in the refresh operation. It does not directly address the issue of running out of resources during the refresh, so this option is incorrect. Option C. XMLA. Endpoint is set to read-only. This setting controls the ability to read data models via the XMLA endpoint, but does not directly impact resource usage during a data refresh operation. Therefore, It is also incorrect. Option E. The data type of the column used to partition the data has changed. A mismatch in data types, where datetime is required for the range start and range end parameters, but the table column is not in the datetime format, can cause the incremental refresh to fail. Both the parameter data types and the filtered data column must be in the datetime format. If not, the query cannot be folded properly, leading to resource exhaustion during the refresh. Given that CSV files do not support query folding, we can confidently rule out option D. The refresh failure for Model 1 in our question is likely due to a data type change in the partition column, making option E the best answer. Question 27. You have a Fabric tenant that uses a Microsoft Power BI premium capacity. You need to enable scale-out for a semantic model. What should you do first? A. At the semantic model level, set large dataset storage format to off. B. At the tenant level, set create and use metrics to enabled. C. At the semantic model level, set large dataset storage format to on. D. At the tenant level, set data activator to enabled. Pause the video and take a moment to think and answer. The correct answer is option C. To enable scale-out for a semantic model, we need to follow the steps given in the documentation, which says that we need to go to the semantic model level and set large dataset storage format to on. All the other options are incorrect. Question 28. You have a Fabric tenant that contains a warehouse. The warehouse uses row-level security, RLS. You create a direct lake semantic model that uses the delta tables and RLS of the warehouse. When users interact with a report built from the model, which mode will be used by the DAX queries? A. Direct query. B. Dual C. Direct lake. D. Import. Please pause the video and give it a think and answer the question. The correct answer is A. Direct query, if you thought option C. Direct lake was correct, because the RLS applies to queries on a warehouse. You're on the right track. But there's an important limitation to note. When using Power BI queries on a warehouse in direct lake mode, there is a known issue where it falls back to direct query mode to comply with row-level security. Microsoft documentation supports this. Queries using row-level security against tables in the warehouse, including the Lakehouse SQL Analytics endpoint, will fall back to direct query mode. Thus, option A is the correct answer. Why other options are incorrect? Let's check. Option B, dual. Dual mode allows tables to operate in both import and direct query modes, depending on the query context. While this can optimize performance, dual mode does not inherently address the enforcement of RLS for direct lake semantic models. Consistent enforcement of RLS requires queries to be executed directly against the source where RLS is defined, which direct query ensures. Dual mode's primary function is performance optimization, not security enforcement. Option D. Import is also incorrect, because import mode involves loading data into Power BI's in-memory storage, which allows for fast query performance since the data is readily available in memory. However, it does not interact with the live data source after the initial data load, meaning it cannot dynamically enforce RLS. RLS needs to be applied at query time to ensure security policies are respected. Import mode's static nature makes it unsuitable for scenarios requiring real-time security enforcement like RLS. For more details, you can pause the video and read the summary, or visit the links in the description to explore the Microsoft documentation. Question 29. You have a Fabric tenant that contains a complex semantic model. The model is based on a star schema and contains many tables, including a fact table named sales. You need to create a diagram of the model. The diagram must contain only the sales table and related tables. What should you use from Microsoft Power BI Desktop? A. Data categories. B. Data view. C. Model view. D. DAX query view. This is a pretty simple and straightforward question. The correct answer is option C. Model view, because model view allows you to visually see all the tables and relationships in your data model. It will clearly display the fact table, sales, in the center, with the related dimension tables connected around it, providing a clear and accurate diagram of the model. Why other options are incorrect? Option A. Data categories is incorrect because data categories are used to specify the type of data in a column, e.g., address, city, country. But they do not provide a visual representation of the data model or relationships between tables. Option B. Data view is also incorrect because data view is used for viewing and editing the data in the tables themselves. It does not offer a visual representation of the relationships between tables, which is necessary for creating a diagram of the model. Option D. DAX Query View is also incorrect because DAX Query View is used for writing and running DAX queries to analyze data, not for visualizing the structure of the data model or the relationships between tables. Hope this explanation is clear. Question 30. You have a Fabric tenant that contains a semantic model. The model uses direct lake mode. You suspect that some DAX queries load unnecessary columns into memory. You need to identify the frequently used columns that are loaded into memory. What are two ways to achieve the goal? Each correct answer presents a complete solution. A. Use the Analyze in Excel feature. B. Use the Vertipack Analyzer tool. C. Query the System Discover Storage Table Column Segments, Dynamic Management View. D. Query the Discover Memory, Grant Dynamic Management View. Read all the answer options carefully and then verify your answer. The correct answer options are Option B and Option C. Let's look at our answer options in order. Option A. Use the Analyze in Excel feature. This feature is primarily used for ad hoc analysis and creating pivot tables based on the Power BI dataset. It does not provide detailed information about the memory usage of columns. Thus, this option is incorrect. Option B. Use the Vertipack Analyzer tool. Vertipack Analyzer is a tool specifically designed to analyze the memory usage of tables and columns in Power BI models. It helps identify which columns are consuming the most memory, providing insights into optimization opportunities. This tool is widely used for detailed memory analysis and optimization in Power BI and analysis services models. It provides a detailed breakdown of memory usage by tables and columns, helping you pinpoint which columns are consuming the most memory. So this is one of our correct choices. Option C. Query the system. Discover Storage Table Column Segments, DMV. This DMV provides detailed information about the storage and memory usage of table columns within a Power BI model. By querying this view, you can identify which columns are loaded into memory and how much memory they consume. Therefore, this is also our correct answer choice. Option D. Query the Discover Memory Grant, DMV. This DMV is used to analyze memory grants and resource allocations for executing queries, not specifically to identify which columns are loaded into memory. Thus, this option is incorrect. To refresh your memory about how to use Vertipack Analyzer and the DMVs, I recommend you watch the videos, link in the description, and read the blogs mentioned in the description. Question 31. You have the source data model shown in the following exhibit. The primary keys of the tables are indicated by a key symbol beside the columns involved in each key. You need to create a dimensional data model that will enable the analysis of order items by date, product, and customer. What should you include in the solution? To answer, select the appropriate options in the answer area. Pause the video and give it a think, as all the options presented here might seem correct at first glance. Now let's take a moment to analyze each one carefully. The relationship between order item and product must be based on Option A. Based on the product ID column alone might seem straightforward, but carries a risk if product ID is not unique across different companies. This assumption could lead to significant errors, such as mislinking products to orders, which would compromise the reliability of your data analysis. Option B. Based on both company ID and product ID is a robust choice because it ensures that each product is uniquely identified by both its product ID and the company it belongs to, This method eliminates the risk of product ID collisions between different companies, enhancing the accuracy of your data relationships. Option C, based on a new key combining company ID and product ID, offers a streamlined approach by creating a single composite key. This can simplify query operations by reducing the complexity of joins and is particularly beneficial for performance optimization. However, it requires additional setup, like adjusting the database schema, which could introduce complexity. Given these points, option B is often the most practical without additional overhead. It guarantees accuracy without necessitating schema modifications, making it an effective balance between simplicity and data integrity. The company entity must be option A, omitted. Simplifying the schema by omitting the company entity could seem appealing if company information is deemed irrelevant. However, omitting it could restrict your analytical capabilities, particularly if any future business questions require insights related to company-specific contexts. Just because the question does not specify the need for company data does not imply it should be excluded, especially considering that product ID and company ID form a composite primary key in the product table. Option B, denormalized into the product entity only. While this setup streamlines product-related queries by embedding company data directly within the product table, it neglects the benefits that company information could also provide in analyzing customer behavior. Option C, denormalized into the customer and product entities. This is the most comprehensive approach. It ensures that company details are accessible across both the product and customer dimensions, supporting a wide range of queries and analyses. This method not only enhances the model's flexibility, but also ensures that all necessary information is readily available, thus optimizing both performance and the depth of analytical insights. From this discussion, I would say that the best choice is option C, as it supports a holistic view of the data, allowing for richer and more contextual analyses across multiple dimensions. In summary, for setting up a dimensional data model in this scenario, the best practices would be to link order item and product, using both company ID and product ID, option B, and to denormalize the company information into both customer and product tables, option C. This setup ensures both robust data architecture and comprehensive analytical capabilities. I hope this explanation has been helpful to you. When faced with questions like this, it's important to assess which option is the best choice. If a question is complex, mark it for review and proceed with others. Then, revisit it later. Always keep an eye on the timer to manage your exam time efficiently. Question 32. You have a Fabric tenant that contains a semantic model named Model 1. Model 1 uses import mode. Model 1 contains a table named Orders. Orders has 100 million rows and the following fields. You need to reduce the memory used by Model 1 and the time it takes to refresh the model. Which two actions should you perform? Each correct answer presents part of the solution. A. Split order date time into separate date and time columns. B. Replace total quantity with a calculated column. C. Convert quantity into the text data type. D. Replace total sales amount with a measure. Pause the video, take a moment to think about it, and then check the answer. The correct options are A and D. Let's break down why. Option A, split order date time into separate date and time columns. This is beneficial because splitting the date time into separate date and time components often results in better compression. Each component, date and time, has fewer unique values than a combined date-time column, leading to reduced memory usage and potentially faster query performance if you frequently query by only one component. Thus, this is correct. Option B, replace total quantity with a calculated column. This option is incorrect. Although calculated columns can be useful, they are computed and stored within the model during refreshes, consuming additional memory. So, Replacing a direct query column, like total quantity, with a calculated column would actually increase the memory usage, not decrease it. Option C. Convert quantity into the text data type. This is also incorrect. Converting a numerical column, like quantity, into text would likely increase memory usage. Text data types generally have worse compression compared to numerical types and could slow down processing times during refreshes and queries because operations on text are less efficient than on numbers. Option D. Replace total sales amount with a measure. This is a correct choice. Using a measure for total sales amount instead of storing it as a calculated column or directly in the table can significantly reduce memory usage. Measures are calculated at query time and do not store data within the model, meaning they don't add to memory load during model refresh, which can speed up the process. Here's a concise summary of the differences between calculated columns and measures. Question 33. You have a Fabric tenant that contains a semantic model. You need to prevent report creators from populating visuals by using implicit measures. What are two tools that you can use to achieve the goal? Each correct answer presents a complete solution. A. Microsoft Power BI Desktop. B. Tabular Editor. C. Microsoft SQL Server Management Studio, SSMS. D. DAX Studio. Pause the video, take a moment to think, and then check the answer. The correct options are A and B. Option A. Microsoft Power BI Desktop. Power BI Desktop allows you to set properties within the data model to discourage or disable implicit measures. This feature prevents automatic summation or other aggregations when fields are dragged into visuals, ensuring that only explicitly defined measures are used in reports. Therefore, this is the correct answer option. B. Tabular Editor. Tabular Editor is an external tool that allows detailed manipulation of Power BI models much more extensively than what is possible within Power BI Desktop. It can access and modify model properties, including those that control the usage of implicit measures. You can set the Discourage Implicit Measures property to true. So, this is the correct answer option. Options C and D are incorrect because SSMS is predominantly used for managing SQL Server databases and is more aligned with managing traditional SQL databases and SQL Server Analysis Services, SSAS, than Power BI models directly. While it can connect to and manage SSAS models, its functionality for directly impacting Power BI specific settings, like discouraging implicit measures, is limited. Option D. DAX Studio. DAX Studio is a tool primarily used for writing, testing, and analyzing DAX queries. While it is excellent for optimizing performance and debugging calculations, it does not provide capabilities to manage model properties or settings that impact how measures are used within Power BI reports. Question 35. You have a Fabric tenant that contains a lakehouse named Lakehouse 1. Lakehouse 1 contains a table named Table 1. You are creating a new data pipeline. You plan to copy external data to Table 1. The schema of the external data changes regularly. You need the copy operation to meet the following requirements. Replace Table 1 with the schema of the external data. Replace all the data in Table 1 with the rows in the external data. You add a copy data activity to the pipeline. What should you do for the copy data activity? A. From the Source tab, add additional columns. B. From the Destination tab, set table action to overwrite. C. From the Settings tab, select Enable Staging. D. From the Source tab, select Enable Partition Discovery. E. From the Source tab, select Recursively. Pause the video, take a moment to think, and then check the answer. The correct choice is option B. Here's why. Setting the table action to Overwrite in the Destination tab ensures that each time the pipeline runs, the existing table, Table 1, in your Lakehouse is completely replaced by the new schema and data from the external source, This approach handles schema changes effectively, recreating the table with the new schema and replacing all the old data, perfectly meeting your requirements. Let's explore why the other options don't fit. Option A. From the Source tab, add additional columns. This is used to enhance the output with extra columns, not to replace an existing schema or dataset. Option C. From the Settings tab, select Enable Staging. This improves data movement performance, but does not influence the schema or full dataset replacement. Option D. From the Source tab, select Enable Partition Discovery. Useful for partitioned data processing, but irrelevant for schema replacement in the destination table. Option E. From the Source tab, select Recursively. This is for retrieving data from nested folders in a hierarchical file system and doesn't relate to overwriting a database table's schema or data. Therefore, choosing Overwrite, Option B, ensures your destination table in Lakehouse 1 consistently reflects the latest structure and content from the external data source. Question 36. You have a Fabric tenant that contains a Lakehouse. You plan to query sales data files by using the SQL endpoint. The files will be in an Amazon Simple Storage Service, Amazon S3, storage bucket. You need to recommend which file format to use and where to create a shortcut. Which two actions should you include in the recommendation? Each correct answer presents part of the solution. A. Create a shortcut in the Files section. B. Use the Parquet format. C. Use the CSV format. D. Create a shortcut in the Tables section. E. Use the Delta format. The correct answer options are D and E, and here's why. To utilize the SQL endpoint effectively, it's essential to create the shortcut in the Tables section, as highlighted in option D. This setup is necessary because it enables the SQL endpoint to recognize and interact with the data as structured tables, which is crucial for executing SQL queries directly. Furthermore, the data needs to be in the Delta format, as indicated in option E. This requirement stems from the fact that only tables in the Delta format are recognized as managed tables by the SQL Analytics endpoint. Attempting to use other formats like Parquet or CSV formats, option B and C, results in those files not being recognized as table objects, thus rendering them non-queryable via the SQL endpoint. Documentation supports these choices by clearly stating that only tables in Delta format are available in the SQL Analytics endpoint, confirming that Parquet, CSV, and other formats cannot be queried using this endpoint. Regarding option A, creating a shortcut in the File section is useful for managing files directly, but for SQL queries, it's more effective to organize data in the Tables section, so it is incorrect. Question 37. You have a Fabric tenant that contains a Lakehouse named Lakehouse 1. Lakehouse 1 contains a subfolder named Subfolder 1 that contains CSV files. You need to convert the CSV files into the Delta format that has V-order optimization enabled. What should you do from Lakehouse Explorer? A. Use the Load to Tables feature. B. Create a new shortcut in the Files section. C. Create a new shortcut in the Tables section. D. Use the Optimize feature. Pause the video and give it a think and check the answer. The correct answer is option A, and here's why. Option A. Use the Load to Tables feature in Lakehouse Explorer allows you to load data directly from files, like the CSVs in Subfolder 1, into tables while converting them into the Delta format. During this process, the tables are always loaded using the Delta Lake table format with V-order optimization enabled, which optimizes the layout of the Delta files for more efficient querying. Why other options are incorrect? B. Create a new shortcut in the Files section. While creating a shortcut in the Files section might help in accessing the files more easily, it does not facilitate their conversion to Delta format, nor allow for the application of V-order optimization. C. Create a new shortcut in the Tables section. Although creating a shortcut in the Tables section is useful for accessing existing tables or data already in a structured format, it does not directly enable the conversion of CSV files to Delta format. D. Use the Optimize feature. The Optimize feature is typically used to improve the performance of existing Delta tables by compacting files and optimizing their layout. It is not used for converting file formats or initially applying V-order optimization during the conversion process. Thus, to achieve the conversion of CSV files to Delta format with optimizations, the Load to Tables feature is the most direct and effective approach in Lakehouse Explorer. For more information, you can read the Load to Table capabilities overview found in the documentation. Question 38. You have a Fabric tenant that contains a Lakehouse named Lakehouse 1. Lakehouse 1 contains an unpartitioned table named Table 1. You plan to copy data to Table 1 and partition the table based on a date column in the source data. You create a copy activity to copy the data to Table 1. You need to specify the partition column in the destination settings of the copy activity. What should you do first? A. From the Destination tab, set Mode to Append. B. From the Destination tab, select the partition column. C. From the Source tab, select Enable Partition Discovery. D. From the Destination tabs, set Mode to Overwrite. Pause the video and take a moment to think about your answer. The correct choice is Option D. If you selected Option C, let's revisit the question, which specifies what you need to do first. To enable partition discovery effectively, you first need to set the mode to Overwrite in the Destination tab. Thus, Option C is not the first step. Option A is incorrect because when you set the mode to Append, it merely adds data to the existing dataset without reconfiguring or partitioning anew, which does not meet the requirement to partition based on the criteria. Option B, while necessary for specifying which column to partition on, logically follows the first step of enabling the right mode. Overwrite, so this is an incorrect option. Question 39. You have a Fabric tenant that contains a warehouse named Warehouse 1. Warehouse 1 contains a fact table named Fact Sales that has 1 billion rows. You run the following T-SQL statement. Create table test.factsales as clone of dbo.factsales. For each of the following statements, select Yes if the statement is true. Otherwise, select No. Pause the video and take a moment to think and check the answer. The answer to the first statement. A replica of dbo.factsales is created in the test schema by copying the metadata. Only is yes, because in Microsoft Fabric, when using the AS clone syntax, the operation creates a zero-copy clone, which means only the metadata of the original table is duplicated. The actual data, stored as Parquet files, remains shared between the original and the cloned table. This results in both tables pointing to the same physical data files, hence the term zero copy. Answers for the second and third statements is no, because upon creation, a table clone is an independent and separate copy of the data from its source. Any changes made through DML or DDL on the source of the clone table, which means any schema or data changes, are not reflected in the clone table. Similarly, any changes made through DDL or DML on the table clone are not reflected on the source of the clone table. Question 40. You have source data in a folder on a local computer. You need to create a solution that will use Fabric to populate a data store. The solution must meet the following requirements. Support the use of data flows to load and append data to the data store. Ensure that Delta tables are V-order optimized and compacted automatically. Which two types of data store should you use? A. A Lakehouse. B. An Azure SQL database. C. A warehouse. D. A KQL database. Pause the video and take a moment to reflect before checking the answer. The correct choices are A. Lakehouse and C. Warehouse. Firstly, we can remove option B and D because Azure SQL Database and KQL Database are not suitable. Azure SQL Database primarily handles relational data and doesn't natively support delta tables or the specific optimizations like vOrder inherent to Delta Lake technology. Similarly, KQL, used with Azure Data Explorer, is geared towards analytics on large datasets of streaming data and lacks support for delta tables or similar optimizations. Now, option A. Lakehouse is ideal as it utilizes the Delta Lake table format, which is central to Microsoft Fabric. This ensures that tables are optimized for analytics, which is detailed in Microsoft Fabric's documentation. Therefore, it is correct. Option C. Warehouse is also a good choice because it employs vOrder write optimization on Parquet files, regardless of the data ingestion method. This optimization greatly enhances read speeds under Microsoft Fabric's computing engines, such as Power BI, SQL, and Spark. Notably, vOrder is a permanent feature in Synapse Data Warehouse, further enhancing performance. Question 41. You have a Fabric tenant that contains a lakehouse. You are using a Fabric notebook to save a large data frame by using the following code. For each of the following statements, select yes if the statement is true. Otherwise, select no. Pause the video and take a moment to reflect before we dive into the answers for each statement. For statement 1, the answer is yes. Utilizing the partition by feature in Spark organizes data into a hierarchical directory structure based on the specified partition keys. This means you can expect to see your data sorted into directories formatted by year, month, and day in your designated output path. This structure not only simplifies data management, but also enhances accessibility, especially with large datasets. Statement 2. Again, the answer is yes. Parquet, the preferred file format for these partitions, is engineered for efficient querying and supports parallel processing. This capability allows Spark to read file partitions simultaneously across multiple nodes, facilitating distributed query execution and thus boosting both performance and scalability. Statement 3. And once more, the answer is yes. Parquet files employ snappy compression by default, which means compression is automatically handled without requiring any additional code. However, if needed, you can specify the compression type explicitly using option compression snappy, or choose a different compression codec to suit your needs. Question 42. You have a Fabric workspace named Workspace 1 that contains a data flow named Dataflow 1, contains a query that returns the data shown in the following exhibit. You need to transform the data columns into attribute value pairs, where columns become rows. You select the vendor ID column. Which transformation should you select from the context menu of the vendor ID column? A. Group by B. Unpivot columns, C. Unpivot other columns, D. Split column. E. Remove other columns. This is a pretty straightforward question, and the correct answer is option C, unpivot other columns. If you initially thought the correct answer was unpivot columns, I encourage you to pause the video and take a moment to review the differences between these two options. Question 43. You have a Fabric tenant that contains a data pipeline. You need to ensure that the pipeline runs every 4 hours on Mondays and Fridays. To what should you set repeat for the schedule? A. Daily. B. By the minute. C. Weekly. D. Hourly. Pause the video and take a moment to think and check the answer. The correct answer is C. Weekly. Here's why this is the best choice for your requirement. Daily, option A, is not suitable because it implies the pipeline would run every day, which does not align with the requirement of running only on Mondays and Fridays. By the minute, option B, and hourly, option D, are also inappropriate because they specify a frequency that is too frequent and does not directly align with the specified days of the week. Weekly, option C, is the ideal setting because it allows you to specify the pipeline to run on specific days of the week, which can be set to Mondays and Fridays. Additionally, within the weekly schedule, you can further specify the pipeline to trigger every 4 hours on these days. This aligns perfectly with the requirement of ensuring the pipeline runs every 4 hours, but only on the specified days. Question 44. You have a Fabric tenant that contains a warehouse. Several times a day, the performance of all warehouse queries degrades. You suspect that Fabric is throttling the compute used by the warehouse. What should you use to identify whether throttling is occurring? A. The capacity settings. B. The monitoring hub. C. Dynamic management views, DMVs. D. The Microsoft Fabric Capacity Metrics app. Pause the video for a moment to think and verify the answer. The correct option is D. The Microsoft Fabric Capacity Metrics app is specifically tailored to monitor and manage capacity-related issues within your Microsoft Fabric environment. It offers detailed insights into resource usage, particularly highlighting when operations are throttled due to capacity limits being reached. The app provides metrics like the number of operations rejected during throttling events, enabling you to pinpoint both the timing and the exact causes of these issues. Now, let's explore why the other options are not suitable. Option A. The capacity settings. While this allows you to view and adjust the capacity settings of your warehouse, it lacks the capability to provide real-time monitoring or historical data that could indicate throttling events. It's useful for setting limits, but not for diagnosing operational issues like throttling. Option B. The monitoring hub. This tool is excellent for general monitoring of activities and performance across various items in Fabric, but it isn't specifically designed to identify throttling events, which are crucial for understanding resource limitations. Option C, DMVs, is incorrect because just like most warehouse operations, DMVs are also classified as background and covered by the background rejection policy. As a result, DMVs cannot be queried when capacity is throttled. Even though DMVs are not available, capacity admins can go to Microsoft Fabric Capacity Metrics app to understand the root cause, which is option D, the Microsoft Fabric Capacity Metrics app that stands out as the optimal choice. Question 45. You have a Fabric workspace that uses the default Spark starter pool and runtime version 1.2. You plan to read a CSV file named salesraw.cssv in a Lakehouse, select columns, and save the data as a delta table to the managed area of the Lakehouse. Salesraw.csv contains 12 columns. You have the following code. For each of the following statements, select yes if the statement is true. Otherwise, select no. All right, let's pause the video right here. I'd like you to take a moment to look over the code and think about the answers to these statements. Once you have your thoughts, we'll discuss the correct responses. Statement 1. The Spark engine will read only the sales order number, order date, customer name, unit price columns from Sales Raw CSV file. The answer here is actually no. Why? Although the code uses .select to specify certain columns, Spark initially reads all columns from the CSV, because .select is applied only after the data is loaded into memory. This means all columns from sales.raw.cssv are read before any selection is made. Statement 2. Removing the partition will reduce the execution time of the query. The answer here is generally no, but it can depend on the context. Partitions in Spark help divide data into manageable chunks that can be processed in parallel across different cluster nodes. If you remove these partitions, Spark processes the entire dataset as one bulk, which might lead to decreased performance, especially with large datasets. However, in scenarios where the dataset is small or the cluster isn't fully utilized, removing partitions might reduce some overhead. Overall, though, for larger datasets and well-configured environments, partitioning is beneficial for performance. Statement 3. Adding info schema true will increase the execution time of the query. The answer is yes. When InfoSchema is set to true, Spark must sample the data to infer the column types. This additional step requires reading the data twice, once to infer the schema and once to actually process the data, thus increasing the initial load time, particularly for large datasets. And a little side note, though it's not directly asked here, if InfoSchema as true were included in the code, Spark would attempt to read only the specified columns directly if it can effectively pass the CSV structure on the first read. This optimization could potentially change the answer to statement 1 to yes, as it would allow Spark to bypass unnecessary columns right from the start. Thanks for thinking this through with me. I hope this breakdown helps clarify how Spark handles data operations. Question 46. You have a Fabric tenant that contains a warehouse. A user discovers that a report that usually takes 2 minutes to render has been running for 45 minutes and has still not rendered. You need to identify what is preventing the report query from completing. Which dynamic management view, DMV, should you use? A. SysDM exec requests. B. SysDM exec sessions. C. SysDM exec connections. D. SysDM PDW exec requests. The correct answer is SysDM exec requests. If you are considering SysDM PDW exec requests, remember this DMV is tailored for Azure Synapse Analytics and Analytics Platform System, which use a massively parallel processing MPP architecture. The Microsoft documentation clearly says that for serverless SQL pool or Microsoft Fabric, use SysDM exec requests. Thus, option A is correct. Let's briefly look at the other options. Option B, SysDM exec sessions. It offers information on user sessions, which doesn't directly help identify why a specific query is stalled. Option C, SysDM exec connections. This DMV provides details on each connection to the server, useful but not specific enough for our needs today. For your reference, here's a quick rundown of these DMVs. Feel free to pause the video and take a closer look if you need a deeper understanding of how each DMV can be utilized in a monitoring scenario within Microsoft Fabric. Question 47. You are creating a data flow in Fabric to ingest data from an Azure SQL database by using a T-SQL statement. You need to ensure that any foldable Power Query transformation steps are processed by the Microsoft SQL Server engine. How should you complete the code? Pause the video and review the provided code and check the answer. The completed code is shown here. The value native query function is used to run a native SQL query directly against the database. This function is particularly useful when you need to execute complex queries or utilize specific SQL features that are not natively supported by the Power Query user interface. We are using the Enable Folding True option because we need to ensure that any foldable Power Query transformation steps are processed by the Microsoft SQL Server engine as per the question. A brief overview of query folding. This is a feature in Power Query that attempts to push as much of the data transformation logic as possible back to the data source. Instead of importing large amounts of data and then filtering and processing it within Power Query, enabling query folding allows these transformations to be executed directly at the database level. This can drastically reduce the amount of data transferred and improve overall performance. You can read more about it from the documentation, and the link is in the description. Question 48. You have a Fabric tenant that contains a Lakehouse named Lakehouse 1. Readings from 100 IoT devices are appended to a delta table in Lakehouse 1. Each set of readings is approximately 25 KB. Approximately 10 GB of data is received daily. All the table and Spark session settings are set to the default. You discover that queries are slow to execute. In addition, the Lakehouse storage contains data and log files that are no longer used. You need to remove the files that are no longer used and combine small files into larger files with a target size of 1 GB per file. What should you do? Pause the video, review the answer options, and then check the correct response. To remove files, you can achieve this by scheduling the vacuum command. For combining files, this can be accomplished by scheduling the optimize command. These are the correct methods for managing file operations efficiently. All other options provided do not correctly address these tasks. For detailed guidance on how to use the vacuum and optimize commands effectively, please refer to the documentation linked in the description below. Question 49. You need to create a data loading pattern for a Type 1 slowly changing dimension, SCD. Which two actions should you include in the process? Each correct answer presents part of the solution. A. Update rows when the non-key attributes have changed. B. Insert new rows when the natural key exists in the dimension table and the non-key attribute values have changed. C. Update the effective end date of rows when the non-key attribute values have changed. D. Insert new records when the natural key is a new value in the table. Please pause the video and think through the answer options and then check the answer. The correct answers are options A and D. Option A, update rows when the non-key attributes have changed, is correct because this is the core mechanism of a Type 1 SCD. The objective is to update existing records with new data when there are changes in non-key attributes, overwriting the old data. This process ensures the dimension table always reflects the most current state of data without retaining historical versions. Option D. Insert new records when the natural key is a new value in the table. When a new data entry comes in with a natural key that doesn't yet exist in the dimension table, we need to add it as a new record. This action isn't about managing changes to existing data, but is crucial for adding new elements into the database. Thus, this is a correct answer choice. Option B is incorrect because in a Type 1 SCD, the practice is to update existing rows rather than duplicate them when changes to non-key attributes occur. Inserting new rows under these circumstances aligns more with Type 2 SCD practices, which preserve historical data by maintaining different versions of records. If you considered option C as correct, you should have been sure that the SCD table that the question is asking has an effective end date column, and usually, managing effective dates is a characteristic of a Type 2 SCD, where it's necessary to track the historical period during which certain data values were valid. In a Type 1 SCD, there is no concept of tracking historical periods with start and end dates because data is simply overwritten. Like in the documentation, if you see there is a modified date in SCD Type 1, and if the question provided this image, we would be confident that option is also correct. But again, the question asks for select the two actions, and the most important ones are option A and D. 1. Updates are performed on existing records when there are changes to non-key attributes. 2. Insertions occur only for completely new keys that do not exist in the dimension table. Sometimes it is better not to overthink and answer the question. To refresh your memory on SCD types, please pause the video and read through it, or visit the link mentioned in the description. Question 50. You have a Fabric workspace named Workspace 1 and an Azure Data Lake Storage Gen 2 account named Storage 1. Workspace 1 contains a Lakehouse named Lakehouse 1. You need to create a shortcut to Storage 1 in Lakehouse 1. Which connection and endpoint should you specify? To answer, select the appropriate options in the answer area. The correct answer for connection protocol is HTTPS, and for endpoint is DFS. If you initially thought ABFS or ABFSS were correct for connections to Azure Data Lake Storage Gen 2 within Fabric, it's important to note that despite ABFSS typically being used for secure connections, it encounters issues in Fabric. There have been instances reported within the Fabric community where users experienced errors when using these protocols, leading to the recommendation of using HTTPS instead. This preference is supported by documentation and likely stems from specific compatibility or configuration needs within the Fabric platform. As this technology evolves, Microsoft may address these issues, so it's wise to stay updated. For now, based on the current guidelines and the date of this video, HTTPS remains the recommended choice. The endpoint DFS is correct because for Data Lake Storage Gen 2, it supports the hierarchical namespace, which is crucial for data lake storage operations, enabling better performance for directory management and file operations. Blob is incorrect because the Blob endpoint is generally used for Azure Blob Storage, which does not support the hierarchical namespace capabilities needed for optimal data lake operations. Using this endpoint would not leverage the full features of Data Lake Storage Gen 2 and could lead to limitations in managing and organizing data efficiently. Similarly, the file endpoint is incorrect for this use case as it is primarily associated with Azure File Storage, designed for managing file shares in cloud or on-premises environments. Utilizing this endpoint would fail to harness the full capabilities of Data Lake Storage Gen 2 and might restrict efficient data management. To learn how to create a shortcut to Azure Data Lake Storage Gen 2 in Fabric, please visit the link in the description below. Question 51. You are analyzing customer purchases in a Fabric notebook by using PySpark. You have the following data frames. Transactions contains 5 columns named Transaction ID, Customer ID, Product ID, Amount and Date, and has 10 million rows, with each row representing a transaction. Customers contains customer details in 1,000 rows and 3 columns named Customer.ID, Name, and Country. You need to join the data frames on the Customer.ID column. The solution must minimize data shuffling. You write the following code. Which code should you run to populate the results data frame? Pause the video, carefully review each option and its corresponding code, and then check the answer. The correct answer is option A. Why answer A is correct? If you see, it uses the broadcast join function, which is a technique used in Spark to minimize data shuffling. In a broadcast join, the smaller data frame, customers in this case, with only 1,000 rows, is broadcasted to each node in the cluster. This means that Spark sends a copy of the smaller data frame to each executor node in the cluster. The larger data frame, transactions, with 10 million rows, does not need to be shuffled across the network. Since customers is much smaller than transactions, broadcasting it will significantly reduce the amount of data that needs to be shuffled during the join process. This makes the join operation faster and more efficient. Let's see why other options are incorrect. Option B. Firstly, this does not utilize broadcast join, which means there could be significant data shuffling as Spark tries to co-locate records with the same customer ID from both data frames on the same node. The distinct in the code does not contribute to reducing shuffling and is aimed at removing duplicate records, which is not specified as a requirement. Option C uses a simple join, and similar to option B, this approach performs a simple join without utilizing broadcast, leading to potential inefficiencies due to data shuffling across the cluster. So this is incorrect. Option D uses cross-join, and this performs a cross-join, that is the Cartesian product between the 2 data frames, and then filters the result based on the customer ID match. This approach is highly inefficient because it initially combines all rows of transactions with all rows of customers, resulting in a significant computational overhead before filtering them, making it the least efficient method for this requirement. By broadcasting the smaller data frame and directly joining on the matching column, option A leverages Spark's optimization techniques to handle large datasets efficiently, reducing network traffic and execution time. Thus, option A is the best and correct answer choice. Question 52. You have a Microsoft Power BI report and a semantic model that uses Direct Lake Mode. From Power BI Desktop, you open Performance Analyzer as shown in the following exhibit. Use the drop-down menus to select the answer choice that completes each statement based on the information presented in the graphic. Pause the video and take a moment to consider the answer options. Let's explore why the correct answers are automatic and direct lake. First, let's analyze the visuals from the Performance Analyzer. The first card, linked to Table 1, utilizes direct lake. This is inferred because there's no indication of direct query in the Performance Analyzer for this card, which aligns with the documentation stating that absence of direct query implies direct lake usage. The second card, linked to View 1, clearly uses direct query as indicated in the Performance Analyzer. Now, back to our question. The direct lake fallback behavior is set to automatic is correct because this setting allows the model to use either direct lake or direct query. The query for the table visual is executed by using direct lake is correct, as it is confirmed by the lack of a direct query tag in its performance analysis. This example is from Microsoft's documentation, which you can review for a deeper understanding through the link provided in the description. Question 53. You have a Fabric tenant that contains a lakehouse named Lakehouse 1. Lakehouse 1 contains a table named NYC Taxi Row. NYC Taxi Row contains the following table. You create a Fabric notebook and attach it to Lakehouse 1. You need to use PySpark code to transform the data. The solution must meet the following requirements. Add a column named Pickup Date that will contain only the date portion of pickup date time. Filter the data frame to include only rows where fair amount is a positive number that is less than 100. How should you complete the code? To answer, select the appropriate options in the answer area. The correct answers are here. To add a column named Pickup Date df.with column is the appropriate choice because it allows you to specify both the column name and the operations for its values. The other options do not fit our needs. df.columns. This is simply used to list the names of all columns in a data frame, not modify them. df.select. While it selects specific columns, it doesn't inherently add or modify columns. df.with columns renamed. This changes the names of existing columns, which isn't required here. For extracting the date, cast date is correct because it accurately converts the timestamp to a date type, focusing only on the date part of the pickup date time. Alias date is incorrect, as it's used to rename columns in data frame outputs, not for typecasting. Cast pickup date is incorrect because pickup date is mistakenly used as a data type. Get field date is also inappropriate as it's meant for accessing fields from complex types like arrays, not for simple type conversion. For filtering, the correct syntax to use is the first option because it correctly applies conditions to the fair amount column, ensuring that only positive values less than 100 are included. All the other options have syntax errors, so they are incorrect. Note: this question is part of a series of questions that present the same scenario. Each question in the series contains a unique solution that might meet the stated goals. Some question sets might have more than one correct solution, while others might not have a correct solution. After you answer a question in this section, you will not be able to return to it. As a result, these questions will not appear in the review screen. Question 54. You have a Fabric tenant that contains a new semantic model in OneLake. You use a Fabric notebook to read the data into a Spark data frame. You need to evaluate the data to calculate the min, max, mean, and standard deviation values for all the string and numeric columns. Solution: you use the following PySpark expression. Does this meet the goal? A. Yes. B. No. The correct answer is no, because the explain function in PySpark is used to display the execution plan of a data frame, which shows how Spark will execute the query, but does not compute or return statistical calculations. Question 55. Solution: you use the following PySpark expression. Does this meet the goal? A. Yes. B. No. The correct answer is no. The expression df.show method is used to display the contents of the data frame, typically the first few rows, which helps in visually inspecting the data but does not perform any statistical analysis. Question 56. Solution. You use the following PySpark expression. Does this meet the goal? A. Yes. B. No. The answer is yes. The expression df.summary is suitable for achieving the goal of evaluating the data to calculate the min, max, mean, and standard deviation values for all the string and numeric columns in a data frame. And ddf.describe computes basic statistics for numeric and string columns. Note: this question is part of a series of questions that present the same scenario. Each question in the series contains a unique solution that might meet the stated goals. Some question sets might have more than one correct solution, while others might not have a correct solution. After you answer a question in this section, you will not be able to return to it. As a result, these questions will not appear in the review screen. Question 57. You have a Fabric tenant that contains a Lakehouse named Lakehouse 1. Lakehouse 1 contains a delta table named Customer. When you query Customer, you discover that the query is slow to execute. You suspect that maintenance was not performed on the table. You need to identify whether maintenance tasks were performed on Customer. Solution. You run the following Spark SQL statement. Describe history Customer. Does this meet the goal? A. Yes. B. No. The correct answer is yes. Because the Spark SQL statement, Describe history, Customer provides a detailed history of all operations performed on the table, such as updates, merges, deletes, and optimizations, which are considered maintenance tasks. By reviewing the history, you can confirm whether any maintenance tasks have been executed, which could affect the query performance. Question 58. Solution. You run the following Spark SQL statement. Refresh table Customer. Does this meet the goal? A. Yes. B. No. The answer is no. Running the refresh table Customer command is used to update the metadata of a table and ensure that any changes to the underlying data are recognized by the Spark engine. However, this command does not provide information on whether maintenance tasks were performed on the delta table. Question 59. Solution. You run the following Spark SQL statement. Explain table Customer. Does this meet the goal? A. Yes. B. No. The answer is no. The solution does not meet the goal. The explain command is used to show the logical and physical plans for a query, helping to understand how Spark will execute the query, but it does not provide information about whether maintenance tasks have been performed on a table. Question 68. You have a Fabric tenant. You need to configure OneLake security for users shown in the following table. The solution must follow the principle of least privilege. Which permission should you assign to each user? To answer, select the appropriate options in the answer area. Pause the video and consider the options before checking the answer. User 1 requires the Read All permission. This permission grants comprehensive access across the entire Lakehouse, allowing User 1 to read all data using Apache Spark, which is essential for their role. User 2 requires the Read Data permission. This specific permission is crucial for accessing data via the SQL Analytics endpoint. It allows User 2 to read all data available through SQL endpoints without the restrictions of SQL policies. Question 69. You have an Azure Repos repository named Repo1 and a Fabric-enabled Microsoft Power BI Premium capacity. The capacity contains two workspaces named Workspace 1 and Workspace 2. Git integration is enabled at the workspace level. You plan to use Microsoft Power BI Desktop and Workspace 1 to make version control changes to a semantic model stored in Repo 1. The changes will be built and deployed to Workspace 2 by using Azure pipelines. You need to ensure that report and semantic model definitions are saved as individual text files in a folder hierarchy. The solution must minimize development and maintenance effort. In which file format should you save the changes? A. PBIP. B. PBIDS. C. PBIT. D. PBIX. This is a straightforward question. The correct answer is PBIP. When you save work as a PBIP, Power BI Desktop organizes report and semantic model items into individual text files within folders. This aligns perfectly with what the question requires. To provide further clarity, the Power BI documentation states that saving as a Power BI project, PBIP, allows for better authoring, collaboration, and project management, as all item definitions are stored as plain text files in an intuitive folder structure. Here's why the other options are not suitable. PBIDS files are specific to Power BI data sources and are used primarily for managing connection settings, not for saving project files. PBIT files are templates that provide a starting point for reports, but do not include actual data, making them unsuitable for complete project versioning. PBX files contain both the report structure and the data imported from various sources, which is more than what's needed for simple project management and version control. Below is a summary of the key differences between these file formats. Question 70. You are implementing a Medallion architecture in a single fabric workspace. You have a lakehouse that contains the bronze and silver layers and a warehouse that contains the gold layer. You create the items required to populate the layers as shown in the following table. You need to ensure that the layers are populated daily in sequential order, such that silver is populated only after bronze is complete, and gold is populated only after silver is complete. The solution must minimize development effort and complexity. What should you use to execute each set of items? Each option may be used once, more than once, or not at all. Pause the video and give it a think and check the answer. The appropriate triggers and actions should be, for orchestration pipeline, a schedule, because you need a schedule to automatically trigger the sequence of processes daily. This ensures that the data in each layer is refreshed and processed on a daily basis. For bronze layer, an invoke pipeline activity. Since the bronze layer uses pipelines with copy activities, an invoke pipeline activity is suitable. It will trigger the pipeline that contains the copy activities necessary for populating the bronze layer. For silver layer, a pipeline data flow activity because it utilizes data flows. This activity will specifically trigger the data flow processes that transform and refine the data post-bronze layer processing. For gold layer, a pipeline stored procedure activity because the gold layer uses stored procedures, and thus a pipeline stored procedure activity is the most direct method to execute these procedures. This activity ensures that the stored procedures which form the gold layer are run after the silver layer is fully processed. Hope this explanation was helpful. Question 71. You are building a solution by using a Fabric notebook. You have a Spark data frame assigned to a variable named df. The data frame returns 4 columns. You need to change the data type of a string column named age to integer. The solution must return a data frame that includes all the columns. How should you complete the code? Each value may be used once, more than once, or not at all. Pause the video and give it a think and check the answer. The correct answer is here. The withColumn method is used to either add a new column to the data frame or replace an existing column with the same name. In this case, it's modifying the age column. Cast int. This part of the code casts or converts the values in the age column to integers. If the original values in age are in a different data type, like string or float, they will be converted to integers. Show method displays the rows of the data frame in a tabular form. It's used here to visually inspect the results of the cast operation. Question 72. You have an Azure Data Lake Storage Gen 2 account named Storage1 that contains a Parquet file named sales. Parquet. You have a Fabric tenant that contains a workspace named Workspace1. Using a notebook in Workspace1, you need to load the content of the file to the default Lakehouse. The solution must ensure that the content will display automatically as a table named Sales in Lakehouse Explorer. How should you complete the code? To answer, select the appropriate options in the answer area. Pause the video and think about this. The correct format is Delta. If you considered Parquet, remember that the requirement specifically mentions that the solution must ensure that the content will display automatically as a table named Sales in Lakehouse Explorer. This is achievable only with Delta tables, as they automatically integrate with the Lakehouse environment. Use the method SaveAsTable with the name Sales to directly register the table in the Tables section of Lakehouse Explorer, meeting the explicit requirements of the scenario. Additional note on usage. When using the SaveAsTable as method, you do not need to specify the tables prefix, as Spark handles this internally when managing metadata for the table. Using Save, the full path needs to be explicitly defined if you're not using SaveAsTable. Question 73. You have a Fabric workspace named Workspace 1 that contains a Lakehouse named Lakehouse 1. In Workspace 1, you create a data pipeline named Pipeline 1. You have CSV files stored in an Azure storage account. You need to add an activity to Pipeline 1 that will copy data from the CSV files to Lakehouse 1. The activity must support Power Query M formula language expressions. Which type of activity should you add? A. Dataflow. B. Notebook. C. Script. D. Copy data. Pause the video and give it a think and check the answer. The correct answer is A. Dataflow. Here's why. Dataflow activities in Fabric support the use of Power Query M formula language, which allows for advanced data transformation capabilities during the data ingestion process. By using data flows, you can efficiently transform data from CSV files and load it into Lakehouse 1 with transformations defined in Power Query M. Other options are less appropriate because B. Notebook typically involves using Python, Scala, or SQL for data processing tasks within Spark environments and does not natively support Power Query M formula language. C. Script can involve various scripting activities but does not specify the direct use of Power Query M formula language as part of its processing. D. Copy data activity is mainly used for copying data without advanced transformations that Power Query M provides. While it can move data from CSV files to Lakehouse 1, it lacks the transformation capability provided by Power Query M. Thus, to utilize Power Query M for transformations as part of the data ingestion process into Lakehouse 1, using a data flow is the most suitable and direct approach. Question 74. You have a Fabric tenant that contains Lakehouse named Lakehouse 1. Lakehouse 1 contains a delta table with 8 columns. You receive new data that contains the same 8 columns and 2 additional columns. You create a Spark data frame and assign the data frame to a variable named df. The data frame contains the new data. You need to add the new data to the delta table to meet the following requirements. Keep all the existing rows. Ensure that all the new data is added to the table. How should you complete the code? To answer, select the appropriate options in the answer area. Pause the video and give it a think and check the answer. The correct answer is append and merge, schema true. Mode, append, is used because you need to add the new data rows to the existing delta table without overwriting or removing any existing data. And option merge schema, true, is crucial when the incoming data has new columns not present in the existing table. Setting merge schema to true allows the schema of the delta table to be updated to accommodate the new columns, ensuring that all the new data is added correctly. Why other options are incorrect. Mode error and error if exists. These would stop the operation if the table exists, which is not suitable as you want to add data to an existing table. Mode ignore would ignore the write operation if the table already exists, thus not adding any new data. Overwrite mode would delete all existing data before adding new data, which contradicts the requirement to keep all existing rows. Option overwrite. Schema, false. Overwrite schema, true. These options pertain to completely replacing the schema, which isn't necessary here and could lead to data loss or schema mismatches, since only adding new columns is required, not a full schema replacement. Question 75. You have a Fabric warehouse that contains a table named sales.orders. Sales.orders contains the following columns. You need to write a T-SQL query that will return the following columns. How should you complete the code? To answer, select the appropriate options in the answer area. This is a pretty straightforward SQL question. The answers are coalesce and least. Coalesce is designed to return the first non-null expression among its arguments. In this case, you want to return the weight if it's not null, otherwise the quantity if it's not null, and if both are null, you want to return 1. Choose. This function selects an item from a list based on an index, which doesn't suit the requirement here. It doesn't handle null values or provide fallback logic like coalesce. So it is incorrect. IIF. This is a conditional function that works well for simple true-false scenarios, but would require nested conditions to achieve what coalesce does easily in this context. Thus, it is also incorrect. Least is the correct answer because it compares two or more expressions and returns the smallest value. In this scenario, you need to return the lowest price between list price and sale price, ignoring null values. Coalesce. While coalesce, list price, sale price, could return list price if sale price is null, it does not compare the two values to find the smallest one, which is what the question asks for. Min. Min is typically used in aggregate functions to return the minimum value from a set of rows, not to compare individual column values within the same row. It would not work correctly in this scenario, where you need to compare values within a single row. Question 76. You have a Fabric tenant that contains a Lakehouse. You plan to use a visual query to merge two tables. You need to ensure that the query returns all the rows in both tables. Which type of join should you use? A. Inner B, full outer C, left outer D, right anti-E, right outer F, left anti. This is another simple T-SQL question. The correct answer is B, full outer join. Question 77. You have a Fabric tenant that contains a Lakehouse named Lakehouse 1. Lakehouse 1 contains a delta table that has 1 million Parquet files. You need to remove files that were not referenced by the table during the past 30 days. The solution must ensure that the transaction log remains consistent and the ACID properties of the table are maintained. What should you do? A. From OneLake File Explorer, delete the files. B. Run the optimize command and specify the zorder parameter. C. Run the optimize command and specify the vorder parameter. D. Run the vacuum command. Pause the video and give it a think and check the answer. The correct answer is D. Run the vacuum command, because the vacuum command is used to remove files that are no longer needed by the delta table, typically files that are not referenced by the table in the transaction log for a specified period, such as the past 30 days. This ensures that the transaction log remains consistent and that the ACID, atomicity, consistency, isolation, durability, properties of the delta table are maintained. By running vacuum, you effectively clean up the data storage, removing old and unused files while preserving the integrity of the table. Option A is incorrect because manually deleting files from the File Explorer would not maintain the consistency of the transaction log or the ACID properties of the delta table. This could lead to data corruption, as the transaction log would still reference files that no longer exist. Option B is also incorrect because the optimize command with the zorder parameter is used to optimize the layout of the data files, particularly for faster query performance, by physically organizing the data in a way that is beneficial for query patterns. However, it does not delete unreferenced files. Option C is incorrect because, similar to zorder, the vorder parameter in the optimize command is also focused on optimizing the data layout, but it does not handle the removal of unreferenced files. It reorganizes data for query performance, but does not address file cleanup. Feel free to pause the video and take a moment to read about the table maintenance operations if you'd like. Question 78. You are implementing two-dimension tables named customers and products in a Fabric warehouse. You need to use slowly changing dimension, SCD, to manage the versioning of data. The solution must meet the requirements shown in the following table. Which type of SCD should you use for each table? Each SCD type may be used once, more than once, or not at all. Pause the video and give it a think and check the answer. For customers, create a new version of the row. This action refers to SCD Type 2. In SCD Type 2, a new record is created whenever there is a change in the source data. The previous record is preserved, allowing you to track historical changes. For products, overwrite the existing value in the latest row. This action refers to SCD Type 1. In SCD Type 1, changes in the source data are reflected by overwriting the existing data in the dimension table. There is no historical data preservation in this case. Here's a quick summary of SCD types that I've put together. Take a moment to read through it. Question 79. You have a Fabric workspace named Workspace 1 and an Azure SQL database. You plan to create a data flow that will read data from the database and then transform the data by performing an inner join. You need to ignore spaces in the values when performing the inner join. The solution must minimize development effort. What should you do? A. Append the queries by using fuzzy matching. B. Merge the queries by using fuzzy matching. C. Append the queries by using a lookup table. D. Merge the queries by using a lookup table. Pause the video and give it a think and answer the question. Option B is the correct answer. Why merge the queries by using fuzzy matching is correct. Merge queries. This is the correct operation when you want to join two datasets based on a common column. In this scenario, you want to perform an inner join. Fuzzy matching. Fuzzy matching allows for approximate matching between the values in the columns, including ignoring spaces or slight variations. This is particularly useful when data may have inconsistencies like extra spaces, different casing, or small typographical errors. By merging the queries with fuzzy matching, you can effectively ignore spaces in the values during the join operation, achieving the desired outcome with minimal development effort. Why the other options are incorrect? Option A. Append the queries by using fuzzy matching. Appending queries. This operation combines datasets by stacking one on top of the other, similar to a union operation. It does not join or merge based on a common column. While fuzzy matching can be used to match records with similar but not identical data, appending does not involve joining data on keys, so fuzzy matching is not relevant here. You need to perform an inner join, not combine datasets by appending them. Option C. Append the queries by using a lookup table. This is not a common operation. Lookup tables are generally used to find corresponding values in another table, e.g., matching IDs to names. But appending queries would simply combine the datasets without any merging or matching logic. This option doesn't apply to the scenario where you need to join tables based on a common column. Option D. Merge the queries by using a lookup table. While merging is the correct approach for performing an inner join, using a lookup table does not directly address the issue of ignoring spaces in the values. A lookup table is typically used to find a corresponding value, but doesn't handle the issue of spaces or fuzzy matching. This approach wouldn't ignore spaces or perform fuzzy matching, which is necessary to correctly join the data in this scenario. Question 80. You have a Fabric tenant that contains a warehouse named Warehouse 1. Warehouse 1 contains two schemas named Schema 1 and Schema 2 and a table named Schema1.city. You need to make a copy of Schema1.city in Schema 2. The solution must minimize the copying of data. Which T-SQL statement should you run? Pause the video and go through the answer options and give it a think and check the answer. The correct answer is option C. Create table Schema2.city as clone of Schema1.city is correct because it creates a new table with the same structure as Schema1.city without duplicating the data immediately, minimizing data copying. Option A fully duplicates the data from Schema1.city into Schema2.city, which doesn't minimize data copying, so it is incorrect. Option B also fully copies the data into the new table, duplicating it and not minimizing data copying, which is also incorrect. Option D. Similar to A and B, this option duplicates all data from Schema1.city, not minimizing data copying. Question 81. You have a Fabric tenant that contains a Lakehouse named Lakehouse 1. You need to prevent new tables added to Lakehouse 1 from being added automatically to the default semantic model of the Lakehouse. What should you configure? A. The SQL Analytics endpoint settings. B. The semantic model settings. C. The workspace settings. D. The Lakehouse 1 settings. Pause the video and take a moment to consider the answer options carefully before checking the correct one. The correct answer is A. The SQL Analytics endpoint settings. If you thought it was option B, that's understandable. The semantic model settings do manage the behavior and structure of the model, but they don't control the synchronization between Lakehouse tables and the Power BI semantic model. This synchronization is handled in the SQL Analytics endpoint settings. These settings determine how data from the Lakehouse or warehouse is exposed and synced with tools like Power BI. Since the default behavior of automatically adding tables to the semantic model has been disabled, you'll need to configure the SQL Analytics endpoint settings to enable or prevent this process. That's why option A is correct. Option C, the workspace settings, deals with broader aspects like permissions and capacity, but it doesn't affect the automatic synchronization of tables to the Power BI semantic model, making it incorrect. Option D, the Lakehouse settings, focuses on managing the Lakehouse itself, such as data storage and security, but it doesn't control the interaction with the Power BI semantic model, so it's also incorrect. Question 82. You have a Fabric tenant that contains a workspace named Workspace 1. Workspace 1 contains a Lakehouse named Lakehouse 1 and a warehouse named Warehouse 1. You need to create a new table in Warehouse 1 named POS Customers by querying the customer table in Lakehouse 1. How should you complete the T-SQL statement? To answer, select the appropriate options in the answer area. The correct answer for the first drop-down is Create Table DBO. POS Customers as select. This option is used to create a new table, dbo.poscustomers, based on the results of a select query. It is the appropriate choice when you want to create a table from the results of a query. Option: Create Table DBO. POS Customers is incorrect because this option would create an empty table with the specified name DBO POS Customers. It doesn't use a select statement to populate the table with data from another table, which is required in this scenario. Option: Create Table DBO.POS Customers. As clone of is also incorrect because as clone of is used to create an exact copy of another table's structure and data. However, it's not appropriate here because the requirement is to create a new table based on a query from another table, Lakehouse1.dbo.customer, not to clone an existing table. The second drop-down, from Lakehouse1.dbo.customer, is correct. Since you need to query the customer table located in Lakehouse 1, this option correctly specifies the source of the data for the select statement. Option: From DBO. Customer is incorrect because this option would refer to a customer table within the same database, likely the warehouse one, but it doesn't specify the Lakehouse one as the source. The question explicitly states that the data needs to be queried from Lakehouse 1. Option from DBO.POS customers. This option incorrectly references the table you are supposed to create, DBO.POS customers, as the source. Since this table does not exist yet, it can't be the data source for the new table creation. Thus, this is an incorrect option. Question 83. You have a Fabric tenant. You are creating an Azure Data Factory pipeline. You have a stored procedure that returns the number of active customers and their average sales for the current month. You need to add an activity that will execute the stored procedure in a warehouse. The returned values must be available to the downstream activities of the pipeline. Which type of activity should you add? A. Switch. B. Copy data. C. Append variable. D. Lookup. You'll find this question straightforward if you've worked with Azure Data Factory or Synapse pipelines. The correct answer is option D, lookup. This activity is used to execute a stored procedure or query and retrieve the results, making them available for downstream activities in the pipeline. It's ideal when you need to fetch data, like the number of active customers and their average sales, and pass it to other activities in your pipeline. Option A. The switch activity is used for branching logic based on conditions, not for executing stored procedures or retrieving data. Option B. The copy data activity is used for data movement, example, copying data between data stores, not for executing stored procedures or retrieving output for use within the pipeline. Option C. Append variable. This activity appends values to an existing variable in the pipeline. It does not execute stored procedures or retrieve data for use by downstream activities. Question 84. You have a Fabric tenant that contains two workspaces named Workspace 1 and Workspace 2. Workspace 1 contains a Lakehouse named Lakehouse 1. Workspace 2 contains a Lakehouse named Lakehouse 2. Lakehouse 1 contains a table named dbo.sales. Lakehouse 2 contains a table named dbo.customers. You need to ensure that you can write queries that reference both dbo.sales and dbo.customers in the same SQL query without making additional copies of the tables. What should you use? A. A shortcut. B. A data flow. C. A view. D. A managed table. Pause the video and give it a think and check the answer. The correct answer is A. Shortcut. In Microsoft Fabric, a shortcut allows you to reference data from one workspace or lakehouse in another without copying the data. This enables you to query both dbo.sales from Lakehouse 1 and dbo.customers from Lakehouse 2 in the same SQL query seamlessly. All other options are incorrect because option B, data flows are used for transforming and loading data, not for querying tables across different workspaces without copying data. Option C, a view would allow you to create a virtual table based on a query, but it still requires that the tables be in the same database or workspace. Option D, a managed table stores data within a workspace, but using it would involve making copies of the data, which does not meet the requirement of avoiding additional copies. Question 85. You have a Fabric tenant that contains a warehouse. You are designing a star schema model that will contain a customer dimension. The customer dimension table will be a Type 2 slowly changing dimension, SCD. You need to recommend which columns to add to the table. The columns must not already exist in the source. Which three types of columns should you recommend? Each correct answer presents part of the solution. Note: each correct answer is worth 1 point. A. A foreign key. B. A natural key. C. An effective end date and time. D. A surrogate key. E. An effective start date and time. Pause the video and go through the answer options carefully and then check your answer. The correct answer options are C, D, and E. Let's go through our options in order. Option A. A foreign key would typically exist in a fact table to link to the dimension table. It is not a column type that is unique to handling Type 2 SCDs in the dimension table itself. Thus, it is incorrect. Option B. A natural key is an identifier that comes from the source system and already exists in the source data. The question asks for columns that do not already exist in the source, so a natural key would not meet this requirement. Option C. An effective end date and time. In a Type 2, slowly changing dimension, SCD, an effective end date is used to indicate when a particular version of a record becomes inactive. This allows tracking the history of changes. This makes it a correct choice. Option D. A surrogate key is a unique identifier for each record in the dimension table, which is essential in a Type 2 SCD to uniquely identify different versions of the same entity, e.g., a customer, as the data changes over time. This is another correct choice. Option E. An effective start date and time is necessary to record when a particular version of the record became active, allowing for accurate tracking of historical data in the dimension. Therefore, it's a correct choice. Question 86. You have a Fabric tenant. You plan to create a data pipeline named Pipeline 1. Pipeline 1 will include 2 activities that will execute in sequence. You need to ensure that a failure of the first activity will not block the second activity. Which conditional path should you configure between the first activity and the second activity? A. Upon failure. B. Upon completion. C. Upon skip. D. Upon success. The correct answer is option B. Upon completion, because this conditional path ensures that the second activity will execute regardless of whether the first activity succeeds or fails. It allows the pipeline to continue execution even if the first activity encounters an error. The others are incorrect because A. Upon failure. This path only triggers the second activity if the first activity fails, which does not meet the requirement to ensure the second activity runs regardless of the first activity's outcome. C. Upon skip. This path triggers the second activity only if the first activity is skipped, which isn't applicable here since you want the second activity to run regardless of success or failure. D. Upon success. This path only triggers the second activity if the first activity succeeds. It would block the second activity from executing if the first one fails, which doesn't satisfy the requirement to ensure the second activity runs regardless of the first activity's outcome. Question 87. You have a Microsoft Power BI semantic model. You need to identify any surrogate key columns in the model that have the Summarize By property set to a value other than to none. The solution must minimize effort. What should you use? A. DAX Formatter in DAX Studio. B. Model Explorer in Microsoft Power BI Desktop. C. Model View in Microsoft Power BI Desktop. D. Best Practice Analyzer in Tabular Editor. The correct answer is D. Best Practice Analyzer in Tabular Editor. This tool is specifically designed to automatically check your Power BI model against best practices, including identifying any surrogate key columns with the Summarize By property set to something other than none. It efficiently pinpoints potential issues in your model, saving you the effort of manually inspecting each column. Here's why the other options are not correct. A. DAX Formatter in DAX Studio. While DAX Studio is excellent for formatting and analyzing DAX code, it isn't intended for inspecting the properties of columns in a semantic model. Therefore, it wouldn't help in identifying the Summarize By settings for surrogate keys. B. Model Explorer in Microsoft Power BI Desktop. Although you can use the Model Explorer to inspect your model, it doesn't provide the automated checks or best practice recommendations like the Best Practice Analyzer. This means you would need to manually search for any surrogate key columns with incorrect summarization settings, which is less efficient. C. Model View in Microsoft Power BI Desktop. Similar to the Model Explorer, the Model View allows you to manually examine the model. However, It lacks the automated best practice checks offered by the best practice analyzer. As a result, identifying issues with summarization settings would require more manual effort, making this option less ideal.
Question 88. You have a Fabric tenant that contains a Microsoft Power BI report named Report 1. Report 1 is slow to render. You suspect that an inefficient DAX query is being executed. You need to identify the slowest DAX query, and then review how long the query spends in the formula engine, as compared to the storage engine. Which 5 actions should you perform in sequence? Pause the video and go through the answer options carefully, and then check your answer. Here is the answer options in sequence. 1. From Performance Analyzer, capture a recording. Start by capturing the performance data using the Performance Analyzer in Power BI Desktop. 2. Sort the duration, milliseconds column in descending order by DAX query time. Sort the results to identify the slowest DAX query. 3. Copy the first query over to DAX Studio. Take the slowest query and copy it into DAX Studio for further analysis. 4. Enable query timings and server timings and run the query to analyze it in detail. 5. View the Server Timings tab. Finally, examine the Server Timings tab to review how long the query spends in the formula engine compared to the storage engine. If you got this answer wrong, and for a step-by-step walkthrough, check out the video linked in the description. You have a Fabric tenant that contains a semantic model. The model contains 15 tables. You need to programmatically change each column that ends in the word key to meet the following requirements. What should you use? A. Microsoft Power BI Desktop. B. ALM Toolkit. C. Tabular Editor. D. DAX Studio. Pause the video and give it a think and check your answer. The correct answer is C. Tabular Editor, because Tabular Editor is a powerful tool designed for managing and modifying Power BI and analysis services models. It allows you to programmatically apply changes to multiple columns, such as hiding them, setting properties like nullable, summarize by, available in MDX, and marking columns as key columns. You can write a CNA script or use advanced object-level actions within Tabular Editor to apply these settings across all relevant columns in your model efficiently. All other options are incorrect. A. Microsoft Power BI Desktop is primarily used for building and designing reports, and while you can manually adjust column properties, it is not designed for batch processing or scripting changes across multiple columns. It would require a lot of manual effort to apply these changes to each column individually. B. ALM Toolkit is mainly used for comparing and deploying changes between different Power BI models or analysis services projects. It does not offer the same level of programmability or scripting capabilities as Tabular Editor for modifying multiple columns within a model. D. DAX Studio is a tool primarily used for writing, formatting, and analyzing DAX queries. It does not provide features for programmatically changing column properties in a semantic model.
Question 90. You have a Microsoft Power BI semantic model. You plan to implement calculation groups. You need to create a calculation item that will change the context from the selected date to month to date, MTD. How should you complete the DAX expression? To answer, select the appropriate options in the answer area. Take a moment to think and verify your answer. The correct answers are here. Here's the reasoning. Calculate. This function is used to change the context of the calculation, which is necessary when you want to apply a filter or modify the current filter context, as in the case of changing to month to date, MTD. Selected measure. This function dynamically refers to the measure selected in the calculation group. When creating calculation items within a calculation group, selected measure is used to refer to the measure being affected by the calculation group. Dates MTD, date. This function returns a table containing the dates from the beginning of the month up to the last date in the current context. By using it within Calculate, it adjusts the context to be month to date. Why other options are incorrect? Generate. This function is used to generate combinations of rows from two tables and is not suitable for filtering contexts as needed here. Measure. This is a function for creating a measure in DAX, but it's not used within the context of Calculate to refer to a measure dynamically. Combine values. This function concatenates values, which is irrelevant to the task of changing the context to month to date. Selected value. This function returns the value of a column in the current context, not a measure. It's not used for dynamic measure selection within calculation groups. The correct selection aligns with the task of creating a calculation item for a month-to-date context using a calculation group in Power BI. Question 91. You have a Microsoft Power BI report named Report 1 that uses a Fabric semantic model. Users discover that Report 1 renders slowly. You open Performance Analyzer and identify that a visual named Orders by Date is the slowest to render. The duration breakdown for Orders by Date is shown in the following table. What will provide the greatest reduction in the rendering duration of Report 1? A. Enable automatic page refresh. B. Optimize the DAX query of Orders by Date by using DAX Studio. C. Change the visual type of Orders by Date. D. Reduce the number of visuals in Report 1. Take a moment to think and verify your answer. The correct answer is option D. This choice is based on the fact that in the provided scenario, the other category in the performance analysis takes up the most time, which often correlates with the overall complexity of the report, including the number of visuals. Reducing the number of visuals can significantly decrease the workload and improve the report's rendering performance. Let's look at the other options. A. Enable automatic page refresh. This option would not reduce the rendering time. Instead, it could increase the load on the report and slow it down further, especially if the refresh frequency is high. Thus, it is an incorrect answer choice. Option B. Optimize the DAX query of Orders by Date by using DAX Studio. The DAX query only takes 27 milliseconds, which is a minimal part of the total rendering time, so optimizing it wouldn't have a significant impact. Therefore, it is an incorrect answer choice. Option C. Change the visual type of orders. By date. While this might help in some cases, the performance issue here is likely due to the overall complexity of the report, as indicated by the other category, rather than the specific visual type, making this an incorrect choice. Question 92. You have a custom Direct Lake semantic model named Model 1 that has 1 billion rows of data. You use Tabular Editor to connect to Model 1 by using the XMLA endpoint. You need to ensure that when users interact with reports based on Model 1, their queries always use Direct Lake mode. What should you do? A. From Model, configure the default mode option. B. From Partitions, configure the mode option. C. From Model, configure the storage location option. D. From Model, configure the Direct Lake behavior option. Take a moment to think and verify your answer. From Model, configure the Direct Lake behavior option D is the correct choice because configuring the Direct Lake behavior ensures that the model uses Direct Lake mode for queries, and fallback to Direct Query mode is disabled. Why other options are incorrect? A. From Model, configure the default mode option. This sets the default mode for new tables, not for enforcing Direct Lake mode in existing queries. B. From Partitions, configure the mode option. Configuring partitions is not specific to ensuring Direct Lake mode across the entire model. C. From Model, configure the storage location option. This deals with physical storage, not with enforcing query modes. So, it is an incorrect answer choice. Question 93. You create a semantic model by using Microsoft Power BI Desktop. The model contains one security role named Sales Region Manager and the following tables. Sales. Sales region. Sales address. You need to modify the model to ensure that users assigned the Sales Region Manager role cannot see a column named Address in Sales Address. Which 3 actions should you perform in sequence? To answer, move the appropriate actions from the list of actions to the answer area and arrange them in the correct order. Please pause the video now, review the action list carefully, give it some thought, and then check the answer. This is the correct actions in sequence. Open the model in Tabular Editor. This allows you to access advanced settings like Object Level Security, OLS. Select the address column in Sales Address. Identify the specific column you want to secure. Set Object Level Security to None for Sales Region Manager. This ensures that the address column is not visible to users in the Sales Region Manager role. This sequence ensures that the column is hidden from view based on the security role. To configure Object Level Security using Tabular Editor, you can visit the official documentation or tutorial. Question 94. You have a Microsoft Power BI semantic model that contains measures. The measures use multiple calculate functions and a filter function. You are evaluating the performance of the measures. In which use case will replacing the filter function with the keep filters function reduce execution time? A. When the filter function uses a nested calculate function. B. When the filter function references a measure. C. When the filter function references columns from multiple tables. D. When the filter function references a column from a single table that uses import mode. Pause the video and give it a think and check the answer. The correct answer is D. When the filter function references a column from a single table that uses import mode. This is because using keep filters optimizes measure definitions by employing Boolean expressions rather than table expressions. Import mode, where data is preloaded into memory, benefits significantly from this setup by reducing execution times. Keep filters ensures that any existing filters on the column are preserved, enhancing the performance of the query. If you see the documentation says, this article is especially relevant for model calculations that apply filters to import tables. And if you see in this example it says, the calculate function accepts a table expression returned by the filter DAX function, which evaluates its filter expression for each row of the product table. It achieves the correct result, the sales result for red products. However, it could be achieved much more efficiently by using a Boolean expression. Here's an improved measure definition, which uses a Boolean expression instead of the table expression. The keep filters DAX function ensures any existing filters applied to the color column are preserved and not overwritten. It's recommended you pass filter arguments as Boolean expressions whenever possible. It's because import model tables are in-memory column stores. They are explicitly optimized to efficiently filter columns in this way. Why other options are incorrect? A. When the filter function uses a nested calculate function. Using keep filters in this scenario doesn't inherently improve performance. The complexity of nested calculations is not mitigated by keep filters. Thus, it is incorrect option. B. When the filter function references a measure. Keep filters is designed to handle filter contexts on columns, not measures, so it won't reduce execution time in this case. So this is also an incorrect option. C. When the filter function references columns from multiple tables. Keep filters is typically more effective on single table filters. Multi-table references may not benefit as much and could even complicate the filter context. Therefore, this is also an incorrect option. Question 95. You have a semantic model named Model 1. Model 1 contains 5 tables that all use import mode. Model 1 contains a dynamic row-level security, RLS role, named HR. The HR role filters employee data so that HR managers only see the data of the department to which they are assigned. You publish Model 1 to a Fabric tenant and configure RLS role membership you share the model and related reports to users. An HR manager reports that the data they see in a report is incomplete. What should you do to validate the data seen by the HR manager? A. Select Test as role to view the data as the HR role. B. Filter the data in the report to match the intended logic of the filter for the HR department. C. Select Test as role to view the report as the HR manager. D. Ask the HR manager to open the report in Microsoft Power BI Desktop. Pause the video and give it a think and check the answer. The correct answer is C. Select Test as role to view the report as the HR manager. This option is preferred because it enables precise simulation of the HR manager's experience, showing exactly what data they see under their specific RLS settings. If you thought option A, select Test as role to view the data as the HR role, while useful, does not cater to specific user experiences. Testing as the HR manager, rather than just the role, allows for a more tailored review, addressing user-specific views and potential discrepancies more effectively. Let's see why other options are incorrect. B. Filter the data in the report to match the intended logic of the filter for the HR department. Manually filtering the data doesn't replicate the actual RLS behavior as it applies to specific users. D. Ask the HR manager to open the report in Microsoft Power BI Desktop. This approach doesn't help in diagnosing the issue because the RLS settings may differ between Power BI Desktop and the service. Question 96. You have a Microsoft Fabric tenant that contains a data flow. You are exploring a new semantic model. From Power Query, you need to view column information as shown in the following exhibit. Which 3 data view options should you select? Each correct answer presents part of the solution. A. Show column value distribution. B. Enable details pane. C. Enable column profile. D. Show column quality details. E. Show column profile in details pane. I suggest pausing the video to give it some thought and rethink before checking the answer. The correct answers are A, C, and D. Let's rule out options B and E first. If you look at the exhibit, you'll notice that the details pane is not visible, so options B and E are not applicable. Now, let's discuss why A, C, and D are correct. Option C, enable column profile. This option is necessary because it activates the column data profiling tools, which would otherwise be grayed out. Without enabling the column profile, you wouldn't be able to access the data profiling features. Option D, show column quality details. This feature is visible in the exhibit because we see the categories such as valid, green, error, red, empty, dark gray. Option A, show column value distribution. This feature provides visuals under the column names, showing the frequency and distribution of values in each column. The data is sorted in descending order based on frequency, which is exactly what we see in the exhibit. If you got this answer wrong, I recommend reviewing the documentation on data profiling tools or pausing the video to read through it carefully. Question 97. You have a Fabric warehouse that contains a table named Sales Products. Sales Products contains the following columns. You need to write a T-SQL query that will return the following columns. How should you complete the code? To answer, select the appropriate options in the answer area. This is a simple and straightforward T-SQL query. The correct answer is here. First, for the highest selling price column, we want to return the highest value among 3 prices: list price, wholesale price, and agent price. To achieve this, the correct function to use is greatest. This function compares the values and gives us the highest one. Other options like coalesce, IIF, or max aren't suitable here because coalesce returns the first non-null value among its arguments, but does not compare their values. IIF, a conditional function, not suitable for finding the highest value, and max, works on aggregate data in a group, not for comparing values within a single row. Next, for the trade price column, our goal is to return agent price if it exists. If not, we move to wholesale price, and if that's also null, we fall back to list price. The perfect function for this logic is coalesce, which returns the first non-null value in the sequence. Using choose. Returns the item at the specified index from a list of values in SQL Server which does not meet the condition of prioritizing agent price, then wholesale price, and finally list price. IIF, a conditional function that requires a true-false condition, making it less suitable for this purpose. Max. Again, this function aggregates data and is not suitable for this purpose. Question 98. You have a Fabric notebook that has the Python code and output shown in the following exhibit. Which type of analytics are you performing? A. Descriptive. B. Diagnostic. C. Prescriptive. D. Predictive. Pause the video and give it a think, and then check the answer. The correct answer is A. Descriptive. Because in this type of analytics, it involves summarizing historical data to understand what has happened. In this case, the histogram is summarizing the distribution of tip amounts, which is a classic example of descriptive analytics. You're looking at past data and presenting it in a way that helps you understand the distribution of tips. Why the other options are incorrect. B. Diagnostic analytics. This type of analytics goes beyond description and tries to understand why something happened. It involves analyzing data to identify patterns or relationships that explain the results. The histogram doesn't explore why the tip amounts vary. It just shows how they are distributed. C. Prescriptive analytics. This involves recommending actions based on the data. Prescriptive analytics might use optimization algorithms to suggest the best course of action. The histogram doesn't suggest any actions, it only describes the data. D. Predictive analytics. Predictive analytics uses historical data to make predictions about future events. Techniques like regression analysis, machine learning, or time series forecasting are used. The histogram doesn't predict future tip amounts, it just shows past data. The easy way to remember the differences is descriptive. What happened? Summarizing past data. Diagnostic. Why did it happen? Finding causes or reasons. Predictive. What will happen? Forecasting future outcomes. Prescriptive. What should we do? Recommending actions. By associating each type of analytics with a key question, you can more easily remember their purposes and when to apply them. Question 99. You have a Fabric warehouse that contains a table named sales.orders. Sales.orders contains the following columns. You need to write a T-SQL query that will return the following columns. How should you complete the code? To answer, select the appropriate options in the answer area. Pause the video and review the code, and then check the answer. To determine the correct answers for the query, let's analyze each drop-down option. For the period date column, the requirement is to return a date representing the first day of the month for order date. The correct function to use here is dateTruncMonthOrderDate, because this function truncates the order date to the start of the specified date part, in this case, the month. Now, let's consider the incorrect options. Date bucket is designed to group data into buckets based on intervals, which isn't suitable for getting the first day of the month. Date from parts constructs a date from individual parts like year, month, and day, but it doesn't truncate to the first day of the month. And date part extracts a part of the date, such as the year or month, but it doesn't provide the first day of the month. Next, let's move to the second drop-down for day name column. The requirement here is to return the name of the day for order date, such as Wednesday. The correct choice is date name, weekday, order date. This function returns the name of the day for a given date, which is exactly what we need. Now, let's take a look at the incorrect options. Date num, day, order date. This returns the day of the month as a number, not the name of the day. Date num, day of year, order date. This returns the day of the year, which is the sequential day count from the start of the year. To help clarify, here's an example showing how the output would look for each of these options. I understand that these functions can be a bit confusing. I recommend reviewing the provided resources before your exam to solidify your understanding. Question 100. You have a Fabric tenant that contains JSON files in OneLake. The files have 1 billion items. You plan to perform time series analysis of the items. You need to transform the data, visualize the data to find insights, perform anomaly detection, and share the insights with other business users. The solution must meet the following requirements. Use parallel processing. Minimize the duplication of data. Minimize how long it takes to load the data. What should you use to transform and visualize the data? A. The PySpark library in a Fabric notebook. B. The Pandas library in a Fabric notebook. C. A Microsoft Power BI report that uses core visuals. Pause the video and give it a think and check the answer. The correct answer is option A. The PySpark library in a Fabric notebook is the best choice for this scenario because it meets all the key requirements. Parallel processing. PySpark is built on Apache Spark, which is designed for distributed computing and can efficiently handle large datasets by processing them in parallel across multiple nodes. This makes it ideal for working with 1 billion items. Minimizing data duplication. PySpark can work directly with data in OneLake, minimizing the need to duplicate data for processing. It can efficiently read, process, and analyze large JSON files without creating unnecessary copies of the data. Minimizing load time. PySpark is optimized for large-scale data processing and can handle large datasets quickly, reducing the time it takes to load and transform the data for analysis. Why the other options are incorrect. B. The Pandas library in a Fabric notebook. This causes scalability issues. While Pandas is a powerful data manipulation library, but it is not designed for parallel processing or handling very large datasets like 1 billion items. It operates in memory on a single machine, which would lead to significant performance bottlenecks and long processing times, and it would cause resource constraints as it would struggle with memory limitations and would not efficiently process such a large dataset compared to PySpark. C. A Microsoft Power BI report that uses core visuals. Though Power BI is primarily a tool for data visualization and reporting, while it can handle some data transformations, it is not suitable for performing large-scale data transformations or time series analysis directly on 1 billion items, and Power BI does not offer the parallel processing capabilities needed to efficiently manage and analyze such a large dataset. Question 101. You have a Fabric tenant that contains customer churn data stored as Parquet files in OneLake. The data contains details about customer demographics and product usage. You create a Fabric notebook to read the data into a Spark data frame. You then create column charts in the notebook that show the distribution of retained customers as compared to lost customers based on geography, the number of products purchased, age, and customer tenure. Which type of analytics are you performing? A. Diagnostic. B. Descriptive. C. Prescriptive. D. Predictive. Pause the video and take a moment to think it through. The correct answer is B. Descriptive. B. Descriptive. Descriptive analytics. This type of analytics involves summarizing and describing historical data to understand what has happened. In this scenario, you are creating column charts to show the distribution of retained versus lost customers based on various factors like geography, the number of products purchased, age, and customer tenure. These charts help you understand the current state or past behavior of your customers, which is the essence of descriptive analytics. Why the other options are incorrect. A. Diagnostic. Purpose. Diagnostic analytics goes a step further than descriptive analytics by attempting to explain why something happened. It involves analyzing data to identify patterns, relationships, or causes behind an event. It is inapplicable here because in your scenario, you're only summarizing and visualizing the data, descriptive, not analyzing the underlying reasons for customer churn, diagnostic. C. Prescriptive. Prescriptive analytics involves recommending actions based on the data. It typically uses optimization techniques, simulations, or algorithms to suggest the best course of action. It is inapplicable here because you are not recommending any actions or decisions based on the data. You're simply summarizing and visualizing it. D. Predictive. Predictive analytics uses historical data to make predictions about future events. This often involves using statistical models or machine learning to forecast future outcomes. It is inapplicable here because you are not making any predictions or forecasts about future customer behavior. You are only describing past and current data. The easy way to remember the differences is descriptive. What happened? Summarizing past data. Diagnostic. Why did it happen? Finding causes or reasons. Predictive. What will happen? Forecasting future outcomes. Prescriptive. What should we do? Recommending actions. By associating each type of analytics with a key question, you can more easily remember their purposes and when to apply them. Question 102. You have a Fabric tenant that contains a semantic model. The model contains data about retail stores. You need to write a DAX query that will be executed by using the XMLA endpoint. The query must return the total amount of sales from the same period last year. How should you complete the DAX expression? To answer, select the appropriate options in the answer area. Pause the video and review the code and check the answer. The correct answer for first drop-down is calculate, and second drop-down is _lie sales. The calculate function is used to modify the filter context of a calculation, allowing you to evaluate an expression under a specific set of conditions. In this case, it's used to calculate the total sales for the same period last year, which is exactly what you need. Lie sales. This is the variable that stores the calculated value of total sales for the same period last year. Returning lie sales at the end ensures that the calculated result is output by the query. Why the other options are incorrect. First drop-down, calculate table. This function returns a table rather than a single value. Since you are interested in calculating a single scalar value for total sales, calculate table is not appropriate here. Filter. This function returns a table of filtered rows, not a calculated value. It's not used to directly calculate the total sales. Summarize. This is used to create a summary table, not for calculating a specific scalar value like total sales. Summarize columns. Similar to summarize, this function creates a table rather than calculating a scalar value. Second drop-down, total sales. This would return the total sales for the current context, not the calculated value from the same period last year. Lie sales. This syntax with curly braces is not valid in this context and would cause an error. VAR. VAR is a keyword used to declare variables in DAX and cannot be returned as a value. Question 103. You have a Fabric workspace named Workspace 1 that contains a Dataflow named Dataflow 1. Dataflow 1 returns 500 rows of data. You need to identify the minimum and maximum values for each column in the query results. Which 3 data view options should you select? Each correct answer presents part of the solution. A. Show column value distribution. B. Enable column profile. C. Show column profile in details. Pane D. Show column quality details. E. Enable details pane. I suggest pausing the video to give it some thought and rethink before checking the answer. The correct answers are B, C, and E. Let's discuss why these options are correct. Option B. Enable column profile. Firstly, this option is necessary because it activates the column data profiling tools, which would otherwise be grayed out. Without enabling the column profile, you wouldn't be able to access the data profiling features. Option C. Show column profile in details pane. This option displays detailed column profiling information in the details pane, including the min and max values for each column. And option E. Enable details pane. This is required to view the column profile in the details pane. Without enabling this, you wouldn't be able to see the detailed column statistics. Let's see the incorrect options. Option A. Show column value distribution. This feature provides visuals under the column names, showing the frequency and distribution of values in each column, which is not what we need. Option D. Column quality. This focuses on data quality metrics like valid, error, and empty percentages, which are not directly related to finding the min and max values. Here's a summary of the key data profiling tools in Power Query. Question 104. You have a Fabric tenant that contains a Microsoft Power BI report. You are exploring a new semantic model. You need to display the following column statistics: count, average, null count, distinct count, standard deviation. Which Power Query function should you run? A. Table schema. B. Table view. C. Table fuzzy group. D. Table profile. This is a straightforward question, and the correct answer is option D. Table profile. This function generates detailed statistics for each column in a table, including count, average, null count, distinct count, and standard deviation. It is specifically designed for profiling data and obtaining these types of summary statistics. Why the other options are incorrect? Table schema. This function returns the schema information of a table, such as column names and data types, but it does not provide statistical information like counts or averages. Table view. This function is used to create a virtual table or view of data, which can be used to control how data is accessed, but it does not generate column statistics. Table fuzzy group. This function is used for grouping data based on fuzzy matching criteria, useful for handling data with slight variations or misspellings, but it does not provide statistical summaries. Note: this question is part of a series of questions that present the same scenario. Each question in the series contains a unique solution that might meet the stated goals. Some question sets might have more than one correct solution, while others might not have a correct solution. After you answer a question in this section, you will not be able to return to it. As a result, these questions will not appear in the review screen. This is one of the questions I missed in the question series of 57, 58, and 59. So here it is. You have a Fabric tenant that contains a Lakehouse named Lakehouse 1. Lakehouse 1 contains a delta table named Customer. When you query Customer, you discover that the query is slow to execute. You suspect that maintenance was not performed on the table. You need to identify whether maintenance tasks were performed on Customer. Solution. You run the following Spark SQL statement. Describe detail Customer. Does this meet the goal? A. Yes. B. No. The answer is no. Running the describe detail. Customer command in Spark SQL gives you metadata about the delta table, such as file count, table size, and the last operation timestamp. However, it doesn't indicate whether maintenance tasks like vacuuming, compaction, or optimization were performed. To check if maintenance tasks have been executed, use the Describe History Customer command. This provides a detailed history of all operations on the table, including those considered maintenance tasks. If you missed the question series, I recommend watching them for more insights. Note: this question is part of a series of questions that present the same scenario. Each question in the series contains a unique solution that might meet the stated goals. Some question sets might have more than one correct solution, while others might not have a correct solution. After you answer a question in this section, you will not be able to return to it. As a result, these questions will not appear in the review screen. This is one of the questions I missed in the question series of 54, 55, and 56, so here it is. You have a Fabric tenant that contains a new semantic model in OneLake. You use a Fabric notebook to read the data into a Spark data frame. You need to evaluate the data to calculate the min, max, mean, and standard deviation values for all the string and numeric columns. Solution: you use the following PySpark expression: df.explain. .show. Does this meet the goal? A. Yes. B. No. The correct answer is no, because firstly, this code would result in an error because the explain method is used to print the execution plan of a data frame and does not return a data frame itself, so it cannot be chained with show. Even if we consider using explain, it is incorrect for this task because df-explain only displays the execution plan and does not calculate or display statistics like min, max, mean, or standard deviation for the columns. The expression df.summary is suitable for achieving the goal of evaluating the data to calculate the min, max, mean, and standard deviation values for all the string and numeric columns in a data frame. And ddf.describe computes basic statistics for numeric and string columns. If you missed the question series, I recommend watching them for more insights. This question is part of a series of questions that present the same scenario. Each question in the series contains a unique solution that might meet the stated goals. Some question sets might have more than one correct solution, while others might not have a correct solution. After you answer a question in this section, you will not be able to return to it. As a result, these questions will not appear in the review screen. Question 107. You have a Fabric tenant that contains a semantic model named Model 1. You discover that the following query performs slowly against Model 1. You need to reduce the execution time of the query. Solution: you replace line 4 by using the following code: isempty related table order item. Does this meet the goal? A. Yes. B. No. Pause the video and give it a think and check the answer. The correct answer is no. The replacement with isempty related table order item does not significantly reduce execution time. Both isempty and Contoso perform similar operations, and using isempty doesn't inherently optimize performance in this context. Therefore, the solution does not meet the goal of reducing the query's execution time. Question 108. Solution: you replace line 4 by using the following code. Not is empty calculate table. Order item. Does this meet the goal? A. Yes. B. No. Pause the video and give it a think and check the answer. The correct answer is yes. Using not is empty calculate table. Order item effectively filters out customers with no related order item rows. This approach is efficient because it directly checks if there are any related rows in the order item table and returns true only if related rows exist. This meets the goal of reducing the query's execution time by simplifying the condition, making the query more efficient. Question 109. You replace line 4 by using the following code. Calculate count rows. Order item greater than or equal to 0. Does this meet the goal? A. Yes. B. No. The correct answer is no. Using calculate count rows, order item greater than or equal to 0 is logically incorrect for filtering because count rows will always return a non-negative number including 0. This condition will always evaluate to true, thus not effectively filtering out customers with no orders. The original intent of the query is to filter out customers with no related order item rows, and this condition does not achieve that. Therefore, it does not meet the goal of reducing the query's execution time effectively. If you've completed this playlist, I want to congratulate you on your dedication. I believe you're ready and confident for the exam. Best of luck. Please leave a comment if this playlist helped, so I can create more content like this for you.